Kathy, can you hear me?
I can, and you can
Can you
hear
hear me?
me, but I didn't hear any response from the folks in-house, so I'm not
No.
sure.
They may have us not on the live stream yet.
Watching the clock there, and then watching the clock. Good afternoon, everyone. I'll now call the committee of the whole meeting to order here at 5 p.m. Councillor Thompson, Councillor Coburn, you can hear me?
Can hear you fine, thank you.
Good, thank you. The territorial acknowledgement. In the spirit of reconciliation, we acknowledge with respect the history and living culture of the Shinnebec, the people of the three fires known as Ojibwe, Odawa, and Potawatomi Nation, who have inhabited this land from time immemorial. We recognize that these lands are the territories of the Chippewas of Saugeen, the Chippewas of Nawash, collectively known as the Saugeen Ojibwe Nation, the keepers of this land. Georgian Bluffs is located on the lands encompassed by treaties 45.5, 67, 72, 82, and 93. We reflect on our role as treaty people and the need to live in respect and peace and show respect to the First Peoples who inhabited these lands and waters. Adoption of the agenda. Does any member of the wish to make an urgent addition to the agenda? Not seeing anything. Recommendation reads that the order of business be amended to consider items 8.2.1, the DEV 2025-17 Municipal Class Environmental Assessment Structure, D007 Progress Report, and items 8.2.2, DEV 2025-18 Structure S005 Structural Load Analysis immediately following the presentation by Pearson Engineering, items 7.1.1 and 7.1.2, and other delegations ready to speak to the item. And that the agenda be approved as amended. Need a mover and a second. Councillor Corbin, Councillor Winters, discussion. Call the vote, all those in favor. That is carried. Declaration of pecuniary interest. Are there any declarations of pecuniary interest to declare? I'm not seeing any. You can declare at any time. Announcements. Does any member to wish to make an announcement? I'm not seeing any there. All right. Public participation. Presentations. Any person who wishes to speak on a presentation to council must register with the clerk at least 7 days in advance of the scheduled meeting. To register, you can complete the online delegation form, www.georgianbluffs.ca/delegations, or you can call the clerk's office at 519-376-2729, extension 601. Tonight, we do have Pearson Engineering on board with us here. Our 7.1.1 is D007 Side Road 3, Municipal Class Environmental Assessment Update. I'm going to welcome Jesse Borges to, you have 10 minutes to present. Oh, I haven't done this for a while. Welcome, Jesse.
Thank you very much. I believe we've got a clicker here. Very much. Thank you for having me tonight. So my name is Jesse Borges. I work for Pearson Engineering in Owen Sound. I'm here to talk about the Municipal Class Environmental Assessment for D007. And then afterwards, we'll move on to structure S0005 and talk about the load evaluation that was completed for that structure. So through the agenda today, we'll be talking about the existing condition of D007 and the location of the structure, the purpose of the study that was completed by our firm, some stakeholder considerations, background studies, the municipal class environmental assessment, the process that we go through, the evaluation procedures, and then finally the design alternative that was identified. So structure D007, that's located in former township of Derby. now the township of Jordan Bluffs. The existing concrete structure conveys flows for the Katy Creek, which is a Salt River tributary on Side Road 3. The structure is located approximately 1.5 kilometers east of Grey Bruce Line between lots 3 and 4 of concession 11. Existing conditions of the structure. So the existing structure is a concrete rigid frame. The approximate age of the structure it's anticipated it was constructed in 1925. That's an estimate. It's approximately 6 meters wide and has a vertical hydraulic opening of 2.2 meters. The structure went through a load evaluation in 2010 and was load posted for a number of years before eventually being closed in 2018 prior to our participation. The foundations are exposed along the bottom of the structure, some severe scouring along the foundations. The wing walls have cracked on all 4 corners and are showing signs of rotation. There are some vertical cracks in the abutments as well. Unfortunately, the soffit and the deck top of the structure are actually in pretty good condition. But as you know, without these foundations, that's the reason why the structure was closed. So the purpose of the study, as part of the biennial bridge inspections, Pierce Engineering completed inspections for the township in 2024. D007 is part of your guys' inventory. During that inspection, it was identified that the structure was overall poor condition, which wasn't a surprise given the fact that it had been closed for a number of years. Currently, the structure is closed to all traffic loads due to low capacity concerns. And it should be noted that Side Road 3 really only services one concession of roadway. It goes from Grey Bruce Line to Side Road 11 and stops. So the purpose of this study was the Jordan Bluffs Township initiated this municipal class environmental assessment in September 2024 to consider multiple design alternatives prior to selecting a preferred solution. Multiple background studies and investigations have been completed to support this process. So when we completed a municipal class environmental assessment, the one of the major things that we want to do is consider multiple stakeholders. The bridge is located in a regulatory area of the Grey Stubble Conservation Authority. So anything that we do with the structure, we want to make sure that we're going through the proper permitting processes and consulting the Conservation Authority on a regular basis. The roadway itself is part of the Ontario Federation Snowmobile Club trail network. So it's been utilized in the past by this group. And as you know, snowmobile trails bring in a level of tourism through the economy, and it's spending, through spending in fuel, food, and other services. So the removal of this bridge from the network, it creates some issues for that trail system. And, the trail system will need to be adjusted accordingly if the structure is to remain closed. Local residents, stakeholders, Side Road 3 is currently home to only one private residential dwelling, which is west of the structure. It's located fairly close to the Grey Bruce Line intersection. There's also several agricultural field entrances along that roadway. Properties located east and west of the existing structure are owned by the same private property owner. So there is a private property on Grey Bruce Line just south of Side Road 3. They also own a piece of property east of the bridge on Side Road 3. So it's something that needs to be considered. The adjacent concession 11, it has 5 private residential dwellings, as well as a functional gravel pit owned by ECK. The Side Road 3, there is a traffic analysis completed by the township. I'd have to confirm with Kevin there on when it was completed. It was completed after the bridge was closed. Currently, the structure only has an ADT of less than 12, but those numbers are skewed for the fact that no one can cross the structure right now. Who's our clicker here? There we go. The final stakeholder, the Township of Jordan Bluffs. The township currently boasts an inventory of 16 bridges and 30 culverts. That number was increased in 2024 through there was 8 additional structures that were located by Pierce Engineering that weren't included in the original inventory. Based on the asset management information prepared by Pierce Engineering during the 2024 biennial OSIM inspections, the average replacement cost of the township's bridge and culvert inventory is approximately $1.25 million per structure. A 10-year capital works plan was prepared during the OSIM inspections, and approximately 13% of all bridges and 16% of all culverts are considered to be in poor condition. And with that, there's about 35 rehabilitation replacement projects that have been recommended in the next 10 years. The total cost of the 10-year capital works plan is roughly around $19 million, which assumes a 3% inflation rate per year. And therefore, the township needs to be allocating approximately $1.9 million per year into their annual budget for the upcoming bridge and culvert work. So some background studies that have been completed for this project. Our subconsultant Team HC completed a cultural heritage evaluation report as well as an archaeological assessment. Both studies identified that the structure didn't meet enough criteria for the heritage impact assessment. And then for the archaeological assessment, as long as work is completed within the existing right-of-way allowance for the roadway, there's no further disturbance that will be considered to be an archaeological risk. A natural environment study was also completed by Cambium Incorporated. This looks at species at risk in the area, just the natural environment. Based on the report prepared by Cambium, there's protection measures that can be implemented during construction to mitigate harmful impacts to the surrounding environment. There was no fish species risk fish identified in the watercourse, so that makes construction, any work that we complete, a little bit easier. But of course, necessary permits will need to be completed through DFO and the Grey Stubble Conservation Authority, depending on what preferred design alternative is selected. Pierce Engineering also completed a hydrology and hydraulic assessment through a topographic survey. This assessment determined that the existing structure has the capacity to take the 100-year flow rate. So anything that we put back, if replacement is determined to be the preferred solution, we'd want to maintain that flow condition. So a municipal class environmental assessment process utilizes this flow chart system, which is published by the MEA. And really the main goal at the beginning of the project is to identify the class of the EA process. So through the background studies that were completed, we've identified that through Table A, Section 31, reconstruction or alteration to a structure or the grading adjacent to it, when a structure is over 40 years old but has found to have no cultural heritage value, this structure the EA process can now be moved into a Schedule A+, which is now also called an exempt project. So it does not require the project to be reviewed by the MEA. So through that process, we can move through Phase 1, Phase 2. We are taking a pit stop around Phase 3 to talk about some design alternatives. But what this allows the township to do is to self-drive this project to where they want it to go, but while still, doing the appropriate consultation process. So the evaluation criteria that we use, we look at multiple factors. The general ability for the design alternatives to meet to address the problem statement, natural environment, social environment, cultural environment, economic and technical. Technical looks at the ability for the solution to meet certain code standards and the complexity of construction. So through the process, we identified 5 initial design alternatives. Every time we do an MCEA process, do nothing alternative is always considered. It's rarely ever, considered beyond this point. But really, it would be to maintain the bridge closure and consider restriction traffic types, reassessing whether or not we reassess the permanent removal or replacement of the structure in 3 to 5 years. It's really just to push the project down the road. Rehabilitation, unfortunately, it's not really a feasible solution given the foundations, the poor condition of the foundations. We've identified 2 replacement options, one using a precast concrete box culvert, another one using a twin structural plate CSP culvert. Each of these have different estimated service lives based on the material and durability. Both of these options would allow the roadway to be reopened. The township at that point can look at whether or not to establish a full 2-lane structure or a single lane structure that is really just meant to support agricultural equipment to make sure it's wide enough for that. And then the final design alternative is the permanent removal. This would require the original structure to be fully removed and the embankments of the watercourse to be resloped and naturalized. And then there'd be no further work on that structure. So we went through a design alternative evaluation process. We looked at each of these criteria along with the alternatives that were feasible. Of course, the rehabilitation option, again, wasn't feasible, so we didn't include it in this table. There's multiple different things to consider. There's no the do nothing approach. There's no initial cost to the township. But again, this is just the structural condition of the structure won't be improved. Low carrying capacity issues will continue. There'll be continued deterioration of the existing structure. There's no initial cost for the township, but there's no real solution to that. Alternative 3 and 3A and 3B, again, they allow the roadway to be reopened. It's a long-term solution. We can implement a solution that's code compliant. It can also help improve the roadway geometry at the structure. Each of these have a approximate construction value of $0.9 to $1.1 million and $0.85 to $0.95 million. And then the permanent removal solution, socially it doesn't reinstate the traffic flow for the roadway. There's only temporary impacts to the environment. There's transportation-wise, there's little impact. There's minor impacts to the overall township network. Again, this roadway only services one concession, so it would maintain that road closure. And local groups like the Snowmobile Club would have to find an alternate route around that site. It's our estimate that to complete alternative number 4, it'd be roughly $250,000 to $300,000 to complete that work. We'd also look at that point to establish turnarounds at specific areas on each side of the bridge. If there's any concerns regarding garbage collection, emergency services, items like that. So it's alternative solution evaluation. It tries to find a numerical way of scoring each of those design alternatives. Symbols are used to identify their effect on a scale from -3 to +3, either having a high negative impact or a high positive effect. So based on this design alternative, alternative 1, do nothing, had an overall score of -5. Alternatives 3A and 3B, which were the replacement of the structure, had a score of 0. And alternative 4, permanent removal, had an overall score of +4. Alternative 4 had the most positive score, mostly from an economic environment point of view. It is the most cost-effective solution, not only right now, but long-term, There's no future maintenance work on the structure. And then in natural environment, now we're able to reinstate a water course that's showing signs of erosion, scour issues at the structure. So we can reinstate the hydraulic capacity of the water course at the bridge. So based on the results of the design alternative evaluation, the preliminary preferred design solution is alternative 4, which recommends the permanent removal of the existing culvert structure. Key parameters to consider as part of this evaluation are as follows. Side Road 3 is surrounded by various county roads, County Road 16, Grey Bruce Line, and County Road 5, which more heavily use roadway systems. Side Road 3 extends one concession with a current ADT of 12 vehicles. The roadway currently provides access to one private dwelling and 5 agricultural fields, which can also be accessed by Grey Bruce Line and Concession 11. The maximum detour distance created by the structure removal is approximately 9.1 kilometers. Although this detour route will have a very minor impact to the township's traffic network, significant impacts to local property owners may occur, especially the property owner who owns property on both sides of that structure. The Ontario Federation of Snowmobile Clubs will be required to develop an alternative route, a connecting link from Concession 11 west to the municipality of Erin Ildesley. The township has increased, the one thing to consider is the township has an increased bridge and culvert inventory. Like I said before, in 2024, your inventory was increased by an additional 8 structures. And there's significant economic commitments that are coming up in the next 10 years that must be considered by council. So the township is advised to review the results of the design alternative evaluation completed as part of the MCEA process and confirm the preferred design alternative.
All right, thanks, Jesse. Any burning questions right now, or we'll let them do the next presentation? Yep.
Just one, Jesse, if I may.
Yeah.
It's interesting whenever I see the results of an EA, it always talks about concrete box culverts, concrete structures, or twin CSP pipes.
Yeah.
Never talks about Bailey/Algonquin bridges, prefab bridges that could be easily put in low traffic roads and things like that. Just asking why we don't see those sort of alternatives, especially on a road that only has an ADT of 12.
Right. So the Algonquin Bridge, a prefabricated bridge structure, it still requires a certain level of foundations. The digging of those foundations are significant. Typically during construction, areas of the foundations need to be isolated, need to be dewatered, excavated. If we're putting in conventional foundations with spread footings, sometimes soil conditions aren't great. And now we need to start looking at whether or not pile foundations need to be installed. So the use of prefabricated bridge structures, when you have an existing foundation that can be utilized again, that's great. Precast box culverts and CSPs are solutions that are fast to construct. They don't require as significant of excavation work, which reduces construction costs. So, we can consider solutions like that, given the size of the structure, of only being 6 meters long. It's just not economically as, it's fine, but it's not as competitive. So.
Thanks, Jesse. Any other questions for him just before we get him to do the next presentation? Okay, let's see. Jesse, you can carry on with 7.1.2, structure S005, double Saranac Town Line bridge options.
There we go. All right, so we're now moving on to the design alternative assessment and load evaluation for S0005. So again, we'll talk about the project location and existing conditions, the purpose of the project, our involvement with the structure. We'll look at some design alternatives for council to consider. And again, we'll go through another alternative solution evaluation. The similar process, again, this is not a mixed class environmental assessment, but it's through talking with Niall and Kevin, we felt it was a good idea to bring this structure to council's attention, given the condition of the structure. So the structure is located on the former township, in the former township of Sarawak, now the township of Georgian Bluffs. The existing structure conveys flow to the Indian Creek on Sarawak-Keppel Town Line. The structure is located approximately 25 meters north of Churchside Road West, between lot 34, concession 14 in Keppel, and lot 28, concession 1 in Sarawak. So the existing superstructure, the bridge utilizes a steel-free frame flatbed trailer for the main structural support of the roadway, which spans 14.1 meters over an existing concrete T-beam bridge. The T-beam bridge was originally 9.3 meters in span, conveys flow for the Indian Creek. It's our understanding that this bridge structure was purchased by the township from Grey County in 2015, 2016, based on my talks with the county. And it was after that point that steel chassis trailer bed was installed over top. Due to the poor condition of the bridge, the 2024 OSIM report recommended that the bridge undergo a load evaluation prior to the end of 2024 to ensure the safety of the public. As a result, the structure was recommended to be temporarily closed by March 31st. Due to load carrying capacity limitations, it is recommended the bridge remain closed until the township makes a decision regarding the future usage of the structure. So there's multiple issues that are going on with the structure right now. Based on our load evaluation, the deck top itself doesn't have capacity to take full roadway loading. And again, it should be noted that this is a no maintenance roadway. It is not currently designated as a recreational trail system. It's still being used as a municipal roadway allowance. There's load carrying capacity concerns with actual barrier systems themselves, the splice connections of the guide rail plates, the wood post connections, and then in addition to this, the steel chassis itself, there are outriggers that come off the main structural beams. When load are shifted to one side of the bridge, those outriggers were not meant to carry traffic loading. We understand that currently this structure is mostly used for recreational use by the snowmobile club and ATV club. Another thing to point out, this structure is 4.4 meters wide, but sits on a bearing system that's only 1 meter wide. So we've been on site. When you stand near the barrier and you jump up and down, that structure shakes quite a bit, more than you would want it to. So based on that OSIM inspection, we worked with Kevin to complete a load evaluation. Through that load evaluation, we identified a number of concerns regarding the load carrying capacity of the structure. The original concrete structure, again, it's not in great shape. There's a reason why the steel chassis trailer bed was installed over top. There's concrete's falling along the bottoms of the T-beam girders. The abutments and wing walls are showing signs of deterioration. So the purpose of the project, prior to 2024, structure S005 was not part of the township's biennial OSIM inspection program. It was identified by our firm in 2024 as a structure that wasn't currently being included in the inventory. And through that inspection, it appeared that the structure appeared to be in overall poor condition due to significant deterioration. The existing structure is currently set to be closed by March 31st to all traffic due to safety concerns. The structure currently supports a portion of the Snowmobile Club Trail Network, Hydro One Utility Corridor, and is also located in the Grey Sauble Conservation Authority and the Niagara Escarpment regulatory area. As a result of the upcoming temporary closure of the bridge, the township has asked us to complete a review of various design alternatives that are available to be implemented in the future. This presentation has been prepared to outline the advantages and disadvantages of each of these solutions. So again, we're looking at several stakeholders. Grey Sauble Conservation Authority. The bridge is located in a regulated area. The bridge and roadway network are a part of the Ontario Federation Snowmobile Club. Again, like I said, the bridge does support a utility corridor for Hydro One, and it is located in a regulatory area of the Niagara Escarpment Commission. Again, we went over this with D007, but you know, the Township of Jordan Bluffs, you guys have 46 structures in your inventory. There's quite a bit of structures coming up for rehabilitation or replacement in the next 10 years. There's a current 10-year capital needs plan that has been prepared by a firm that outlines a total of $19 million of spending in the next 10 years. Going through the similar evaluation criteria, we looked at multiple parameters and criteria for evaluating each design alternative. We looked at a do-nothing approach. Again, a do-nothing approach would still require that the structure be closed by March 31st. We would recommend that permanent dead-end barricades and signage be installed at the bridge to restrict traffic flow over the bridge. We also looked at a minor rehabilitation, which would help extend the useful surface life of the bridge for 5 to 10 years at a cost of about $50,000 to $75,000. A major rehabilitation, which would extend the structure's remaining service life by 10 to 15 years at a cost of about $100,000 to $125,000, and a permanent removal option, which would cost about $150,000 to $175,000, but would remove future maintenance costs. It should be noted that options 2A and 2B, those estimated useful service lives, are subject to change based on the condition and rate of deterioration of that original concrete structure. This steel structure is still located over an old concrete T-beam structure. It's difficult to determine at what point that T-beam structure will eventually need to be removed as it continues to deteriorate. So we've given you guys estimated surface life durations. At that point, those surface lives could be reassessed, and it can be determined whether or not the structure can remain open for a longer period of time. So the do nothing approach, pros to this, there's cost wise, there's no, immediate design, construction administration costs. There's really no environmental impacts, cultural, archaeological impacts due to no construction activities being completed. Cons, it's a temporary solution. The project is just going to get moved farther down the road. At what point council is still going to have to determine what to do with this bridge structure. Socially, a full closure of the structure prevents the crossing of the Indian Creek for local traffic, trail users, and the Hydro One utility vehicles. There's potential increased costs if there's a do nothing approach. As everyone knows, things aren't getting cheaper as they go down the road. The longer you wait, the more things cost. And municipal inventory wise, delaying this structure, this the rehabilitation or removal of the structure, moving it down the road could have an impact on a budget year, where other structures that are used more by the township could overload that year's budget. So you never want to be in a situation where you have to do something. We're at a point right now where there's multiple design alternatives that can be considered over the next 1 to 5 years. Minor rehabilitation, The minor rehabilitation, what it requires is the wood deck top would be fully removed and replaced. The barrier systems on the bridge would be removed and replaced. This would give the municipality the opportunity to reopen the bridge under a restricted load limit. So based on the load evaluation, that load limit is 4 tons. That highly restricts the amount of vehicles, type of vehicles that can go over top of it. Small recreational vehicles would still be permitted, but even items like the snowmobile club, their trail groomers would be too heavy for the vehicle and for the bridge, and that's limited by the actual steel chassis system of that bridge structure. The major rehabilitation would result in that old steel chassis being fully removed. The original concrete structure would remain in place. A new steel frame system would be installed, a new deck top, new barrier systems. At that point, we would actually look at making some improvements to the roadway vertical alignment. There's concerns with the vertical alignment of the roadway right now. If you're standing on the south side of that roadway, it is actually quite difficult to see across on the north side, which increases public safety concerns. So by doing this, you're getting a considerable service life, 10 to 15 years. Again, with a new structure that could be extended based on how well that the original structure performs. And load carrying capacity wise, we could re-implement something that has a 10-ton limit. It's in our opinion that limit, now that it doesn't allow full traffic loading on the bridge, it would allow maintenance vehicles to go across from Hydro One, from the municipality. It would allow some emergency service vehicles to go across. The roadway doesn't have any residential dwellings on that, so any emergency services that would be required would probably be due to the actual trail users and vehicles on the bridge. And finally, permanent removal. We would have the full steel superstructure and concrete structure fully removed. This would allow the embankments of the watercourse to be reinstated. As we've talked with Kevin and Niall, because this project is part of, this area is part of the NEC, fortunately the situation is if the structure is fully removed, the chances of putting a new structure back in the future will be quite difficult. The major rehabilitation, again, will still need permits with NEC and Grey Selva Conservation Authority, but given that most of the work is related to the superstructure, we're staying away from the water course. That permitting process hopefully would be a little bit easier. So we went through a similar numbering system for determining the preferred solution. The do nothing approach had an overall score of -7. Alternative 2A, the minor rehabilitation, was a +1. Alternative 2B, the major rehabilitation, was a +2. The biggest difference between these two options was really due to the increased load capacity of the structure, going from 4 tons to 10 tons. And the increased service life, going from 5 to 10 year service life to a 10 to 15 year service life. And then finally, alternative 3, the permanent removal, had a score of +5. This really came down to cost for the project, not just now, but future costs, future maintenance, future replacement work. Again, from an environmental point of view, reinstating the water course and addressing a structure that has concrete deterioration and spalling into the water course, that's always a positive outcome. And technically, due to the poor condition of the vertical alignment of that roadway, the proximity of the bridge to the intersection is only 25 meters away. Safety concerns related to having a narrow bridge structure. The bridge structure is I believe it's less than 3 meters wide, which makes it quite difficult for people utilizing the bridge to cross in the same time. Considering all these factors, removing the bridge structure reduces those safety concerns and provides the least amount of liability for the township. So based on the results of the design alternative evaluation, the preliminary preferred design solution is alternative 3, which recommends a permanent removal of the existing bridge structure. Key parameters to consider as part of this evaluation are as follows. Keppel-Sarawak Town Line is a no maintenance roadway with a narrow road surface. The maximum detour distance created by the structure removal is approximately 6.3 kilometers. Majority of the traffic utilizing structure S005 is recreational. Therefore, a permanent bridge closure / removal will have a minimal impact on the township's greater traffic network. The roadway does not currently provide access to private residential dwellings, only agricultural fields, which can also be accessed by the surrounding roadways. The Ontario Federation of Snowmobile Clubs will be required to develop an alternative route for the connecting link from Church Side Road West north to Linden Side Road. And the proximity of the bridge to the intersection, like I said before, the grading of the approaches, the width of the bridge and the roadway, and the lack of guide rail systems increases safety concerns at the crossing. So by removing the structures, those safety concerns are addressed. Thank you.
Thanks, Jesse. I just, any burning questions for him right now, or, yeah, Rick, go ahead. Councilor Lewis.
Great report, Jesse, and there's a lot of things that'll come up when we get the chance to grill Kevin here. But one question I have for you, between the two that you've done, the two presentations, there's a significant dollar value difference between your full removal. The one in the Derby is $350,000, and the one in Sarawak, which is a bigger bridge, is only $175,000. The two numbers, to me, it still look like there's quite a difference there, and I wonder why.
Right. So part of the work for D007 is us looking at the potential of installing turnarounds for private dwellings. And that D007, yes, the structure is quite a bit smaller, but overall, I think the concrete work is quite a bit more. The steel chassis coming off the original structure can be removed with a crane system. And the idea with that S005 is the abutments won't be fully removed. When we can, we don't want to fully remove them. So a debris platform will be put into the water course just to allow the deck to be removed. The abutments will be knocked down to 0.5 meters above water level. So excavation work adjacent to the water course won't be required for that. So there is a difference in price, but based on our cost estimates, that's roughly what we're thinking.
All right, thanks, Jesse. Yeah, just have a seat there. We got one more delegation to go through, and then we'll get to those two staff reports. Oh, sorry, Tobin. Councilor Day.
It's
Sorry.
timely. I just didn't fully understand the last comment. I'm curious why the abutments or some of the abutments could stay in structure 005 as opposed to the other bridge.
So for D007, those foundations have been fully exposed. So we don't want to leave those in right during construction. There's concerns that those existing foundations could topple into the existing water course and impacting flow. For S005, they're still embedded below the creek bed. So anytime that we can leave concrete walls like that in place, it is a natural scour protection for the newly instated riverbanks that are going to be sloped.
And it doesn't create a long-term hazard
No.
as the erosion continues? Okay.
No, we do it all the time. I've done, I think, 3 or 4 bridge removals. And when you can leave those, especially the original structures that are getting up there to 100 years in age, those abutment walls are quite thick. Sometimes they can be up to 10 meter thick. So they're quite durable. And now we can leave them in and they're keyed into the water course. Now we're not having to try to isolate that water course to dig those foundations out. And if those abutments have been there in there for the last 100 to 125 years, there's more harm trying to remove them and trying to reinstate something that's going to stay there. So, but with D007, unfortunately, those footings are cracked and exposed in multiple locations. So it's better in that situation to have them removed.
Thank you, I appreciate it.
Thanks, Justin. All right, 7.2 delegations of agenda items. Any person who wishes to appear before council regarding an item on the agenda must register with the clerk's office. To register, you can go to www.georgiabluffs.ca/delegations, or you can call the clerk's office at 519-376-2729, extension 601, or register at council chambers with the clerk prior to the meeting to start time at 5 p.m. 7.2.1, we have George Angel. Item 8.2.2, DEV 2025-18, Couple Sarawak Town Line Bridge. George, welcome, and you have 5 minutes to speak.
Okay, get her done. Very well. Well, George Eagle, I'm the Georgian Bluff Trail. I'm gonna flip that thing. I just keep rambling. I'm the Georgian Bluffs Trail Coordinator anyway, past president and a lifetime member of the South Bruce Peninsula ATV Club. The points to consider is the trail maintenance, recreation, and tourism is big. The ATV club membership, cost savings to Georgian Bluffs, environmental considerations, partnership with Stony Capital Riders, and location of the bridge and wildlife. Trail maintenance. Trail is maintained by South Bruce Peninsula ATV Club volunteers most of the time. Maintenance is a partnership that is discussed and planned with SBP ATV, club trail foreman, and township representatives. Yep. Okay. The SBP ATV Club has a maintenance budget for our trail system of $45,000. $15,000 for Georgian Bluffs, $15,000 for Sawbo, and $15,000 for North of Wire. New trail development in the last 2 years has cost the club over $80,000. The multi-use trails and this bridge especially are enjoyed by many locals and visitors to the Georgian Bluffs area. Each Christmas, the club gives back over $5,500 to our local food banks and breakfast clubs. Current annual membership for the club totaled over $600 for 2024 season, not including day passes for visitors to the area. The ATV Club has $15 million liability insurance to ensure coverage for our riders and municipalities. The club has invested over $7,000 to the Keppel Sarawak Town Line Bridge. When it was put in 2016, the bridge was repaired with Georgian Bluffs Council approval. $7,000 does not include free labor from the volunteers. The bridge is located on a closed road. Is it standard procedure, or why is it reviewed by the township engineer? Rail trail bridges have not been inspected. Not sure why. Environmental considerations. If this bridge is removed, riders will likely still use the trail, and we've had to put barricades up, and we've done that to stop them from, in the lower water, maybe not this time of the year, but in the summertime, they will ride through the river. And that's not what we want to promote. Contaminating the river water while machines, horses, and bikers ride through the water. And I guess this is a real problem in Beaver Dam. Like, we got somebody working on beavers out there because we used to have a lot nicer forests around here and trails. But when the water levels get high, it kind of messes it up. Partnership with Stony Capital Riders. Trails have also been used by the Snowmobile Club. In 2023, the bridge was widened to accommodate the snowmobile groomer. That was not the original way we built it. They widened it. I just got a call from Chris Carson this afternoon. Sorry, I hope we didn't mess up your bridge. Anyhow, this trail is used all year long by various groups. The bridge is an important link to our trail system and allows access to Wiarton, Big Bay tourism and business along the northwest side of Georgian Bluffs. Please do not remove the bridge. We can work together to find a solution. Our suggestion is to reduce the width of the bridge to 76 inches. Secure guardrails, replank, and post appropriate signs. With the rebuilding of the Avery Bridge, the Snowmobile Club have a route around, and that maybe almost suits their trail better. But for us, we go up, and that Keppel Sarawak Town line was a natural for us. And back to the Algonquin Bridge, I did call or send a text or message email to the Algonquin Bridge people, Alex, and he sent me a quote for that span of a bridge, and for the bridge material and the engineering costs, $60,000. Plus, you got to reinforce your abutments, which you're saying we're going to leave the abutments there. We build them behind it. That crane and plus assembly. They will send people out to do it, or you can have local people do it, but they send out a foreman type of thing. So that's quite a difference of finances if the, if the township wants something, and they say 75 years depending on the load, how big, and that was for a 12,000 pound bridge created. As far as the ramp onto the bridge, because it's so close to the concession corner, this is hopefully going to be carried on as a recreational bridge, and there's a stop sign 25 meters away. Stop ahead sign on the other side of the bridge. Most of us use it, and if it's a bit of a steep incline, that doesn't bother snowmobiles or ATVs or horseback riders. We don't need the general. So I think if we could work together, we could save this bridge, or at least postpone the removal of it and let us use it for the summer at least. And maybe even if we could get a couple of years out of it, we could go through all the processes we have to go through, whether it's NEC or whatever, and because if we're not going to, I think it's probably more of a case of what it's going to do to the NEC to remove the bridge, like the abutments. They were going to leave them there, perfect. We'll use them. Just reinforce them. So thank you for your time, and I hope you give it serious consideration of leaving the bridge in place, and well, not leaving it in place, but let's rebuild. I didn't really agree with them widening it out for the groomer anyway, because I know those things weigh 6 tons or so, and that wasn't really in the plan, because we, as an ATV club, sponsored the building or replacement of that bridge. So, all right, thank you.
All right.
Any questions?
Thanks, George. Yeah, any questions? So we got George here, and stay tuned. The 2 reports are coming up next, so a bit further discussion. Thanks, George.
Thank you.
All right, we're on to the reports here now. Staff reports 8.2.1 DEV 2025-17 Municipal Class Environmental Assessment Structure D007 Progress Report. Recommendation reads that council receives staff report DEV 2025-018 Municipal Class Environmental Assessment MCEA Structure D-007 Progress Report and consider the following recommendation. That council adopt alternative 4 of permanently closing and removing structure D007, and that council direct staff to proceed with amended engineering scope of work with Pearson Engineering to proceed with the permanent closure and removal of structure D007, and that the $271,300 be funded from the bridge reserves to support the construction of the permanent closure and the removal as needed. To get her on the floor, I need a mover and seconder. Mayor Carlton, Councilor Colburn, Kevin, you got a quick overview of.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Pickle, and for you to members of council. I will be fairly brief on this report as Pearson Engineering gave a high-level overview of the municipal class environmental assessment and where we're at with today's report. So the recommendation is to adopt the terms of 4, permanently to close and remove the bridge, and to reallocate the funds that we have already entered into contract with Pearson to proceed with the alternative 4 option for the engineering of the removal of the bridge. As you recall, we entered the contract with Pearson for approximately $150,000. And to date, we've spent about $60,000. So those funds will essentially be allocated to proceed with the final engineering scope of work for the alternative. Again, I don't believe I need to go into the details. Jesse from Pearson Engineering gave a very high level description of the alternatives and the background reports. With Pearson's recommendation as well, that they found that the Schedule A plus or the exemption of the project can proceed. It's basically how council wants to proceed with that exemption order as well. So, alternatively, council can accept the recommendation or they can reject it. The preliminary choice of alternative 4 and take an opportunity to reorder the assessment criteria and direct staff to change the preferred alternative if they wish.
Okay, thanks, Kevin, for that. All right, I'll open her up to council. Let's start with some comments. Who would like to go first?
Somebody's got to go first.
Councilor Winters?
I wasn't planning on going first, but I mean, I'm still of the belief that there was a bridge there once, there should always be a bridge there. I'm not into removing infrastructure and things that are there. What we did hear previously over the last 5, 6, 7 years from the agricultural community that suggested it's a safety issue to use Grey Road 16 as an alternative for hauling crops around. It's not a safe thing. I do get it's a very low maintenance road. I still think my gut feeling is that there's an alternative out there somewhere that we're not looking at. What is a low budget alternative? I don't want to see it closed permanently and removed. Whether we defer this will be my recommendation and we look at some more alternatives. There's got to be something. I mean, we hear other municipalities. I mean, we've seen Chatsworth talk about wood structures. We've seen the Algonquin bridges. We hear that there's reduced prices everywhere. Again, I'm just not comfortable saying that, we need to spend $1.5 million on it. Is there something a little cheaper than what's there? It is a very low maintenance road. The other part of it is we talk about trail use, we talk about tourism, we talk about everything. And we have a snowmobile trail that uses it. Yeah, they could find alternatives, but is that the way that we keep driving out our trail uses, our snowmobile clubs, our ATV clubs, our horseback riding, or whatever it may be? I'm still stuck on that. I know, Deputy Mayor, you and I are probably very vocal about it's a bridge, it needs to be there. I still have that same position.
Good, thank you. Further comments? Not seeing anybody else. Yeah, so Council Winters and I we're both on the same page here. I'm not about to ever say we should permanently close that bridge. If we permanently close that bridge, we'll never get a bridge back. That road is, of course, slow use now because nobody can use it, right? There's all kinds of farmers on that road that got to go to the County Road 5 there to go around on that bad bend. There's so many guys that would use that road to get up to even go to the Katy without having to go to the Grey Road 5 to do that. So there's a lot of guys that would use it. I know it's small in the big picture of usage, but I will not vote for it being permanently closed. I don't think that's the right avenue. I also agree there might be other avenues of getting a better or cheaper, not better, it'll be cheaper bridge scenario. Again, when I kind of look at the comparison on the two of them there, we're going to spend $275,000 to close it, or we could put a twin culvert in for $900,000. So the difference is $600,000 or $675,000, which doesn't seem as bad as $900,000. So again, I'm definitely personally opposed to permanently closing the bridge because once it's gone, it'll never be back. I do know I got a lot of farmers that I do personally know around that area that would love to have that road back so they don't have to go to the county road. That's my own personal opinion right now, and looking for further comments. Councilor Colbert.
Thank you, Chair Pringle. Yeah, I'm left feeling a little unsure. I'm wondering why we asked for an engineering report in the first place if our wish as council was to keep it in place and alter it or bring it up to speed in some inexpensive way. I think I'm always questioning the need for consultants if they give us the information that's based on data, and then we say, well, we don't want that. We just want to go with what we think is right. So I heard my council colleagues before me speak about usage of the road, but I believe that was taken into consideration with the data presented to us by the engineers. So I'm left feeling like when we ask for a consultant's opinion and we respect their professional opinion, we ought to consider that. And I get that there are users of bridges who want them to remain in place. I also have to think about the pressures on council to be forward thinking and to think about where our money needs to be spent in the future. When we read the rest of the agenda and we look at capital needs planning and asset management requirements, that means that we have to make some tough decisions sometimes, and this is one of the decisions where you're not going to please everybody, but I do try to keep those voices in mind that aren't expressing themselves tonight, and that's the larger ratepayer group. Those are just my thoughts. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Coburn. Anybody else? Yeah, Councillor Day.
Nobody wants to disappoint people. Nobody wants to make a decision that creates hardship or continues to make life harder for a farmer. Looking at the entire picture, looking at all the bridges and culverts, I think the number was 46 structures in Georgian Bluffs, and looking at the cost and looking at the state of those bridges and structures and the amount of work that we need to do over the next 10 years, I also am looking at all this data that's presented to us tonight. I would be curious to learn more about how snowmobiling is doing regarding being able to contribute to the economy with our changing winter landscape, and the long-term viability of, speaking as a cross-country skier, I love winter and I love snow, and we have good seasons and we have challenging seasons, and there's just, will the snowmobile club be able to operate in the long run in Georgian Bluffs with changing winter climate? So there's a lot of factors here. If there are more users than the ones that are presented in the data, like specifically with Bridge 007, it's just the snowmobile club that's talked about. But if there's horseback riders or naturalists or ATVers that are using that bridge, that would be beneficial to officially know as part of the data collection as well. So there's a lot of information presented there. I don't think this is an easy decision. I do think making hard decisions is an important thing that we can do as councillors and leadership people.
Anybody else? Good. Yeah, smile.
So through you, Deputy Mayor, we have several branches of OFSC that operate across the township. We have met with Mr. Angel and the captains for Stony Keppel, who are involved in the Keppel Sarawak Town Line Bridge. We've connected with, but haven't yet heard from the club that looks after the Side Road 3 bridge route. And I don't know what opportunities there would be for re-diverting the route. I do know that the last few years have certainly presented some challenges for Stony Keppel riders in terms of getting trails laid and opened, but they've had an absolutely bonanza year this year. It's been the best year for several years, and so there is a determination to try and keep snowmobiling alive and well and running in the area. So there's a commitment, and they certainly have an active presence in the area. And I would assume that the same would be for the club that looks after the Side Road 3 bridge. So I would assume that it has seen some fairly consistent use There's a slight difference insofar as we have actually completely closed the bridge down there. So in theory, it doesn't get used by anyone. The reality is we know that it gets quite heavily used. There's evidence for ATV access being taken during the summer season, and it's almost certainly being used during the winter season, although similar to Keppel Sarwak, there would not be enough space to bring a groomer over that bridge, so it's probably on an ungroomed section. There's no turnarounds either, so they would have to they would have difficulties grooming up to the bridge, but that would certainly not stop them from using the bridge.
Thank you. Yeah, Councillor Day.
If I might follow up, since we now know that ATVers use the other 007 as well, I did wonder about, and our speaker, our guest tonight spoke about how ATVers may ford the rivers or the creeks instead of if the bridges are removed. So if the bridges are removed, and what mitigation would be put in place to deter people from crossing the river in a way that does impact the environment negatively.
Speaking specifically to the event Bringle, to the 007 on Side Road 3, there's probably less of a concern of that occurring on that bridge, just given the significance of the bank drop-offs there. So you wouldn't, it's not you're crossing a wide wet area, you'd still have a very steep bank to get down. The roads would bowl bend, as Mr. Borges spoke to. We'd have turnarounds at each side of the bridge, which would be set some way back from the bridge, and there would be crash barriers in there to indicate not going through. It is part of the OFSC trail route. At this point in time, it's not part of the South Bruce Peninsula ATV mapped routes. So any use that is occurring down there is informal by nature. I should note we have had concerns raised by the neighbouring landowners who are on the concession to the east of concession 11 on the section of Side Road 3, which doesn't go all the way through. So there's an unopened section of road allowance which runs about halfway through the concession before it reopens again for a single property, and I believe it's a gravel pit or an earth pit that's down that road, that section of Side Road 3. And Side Road 3 through that section runs through a very, very wet area. Indeed, part of it is a creek. There is light ATV use that occurs on that property, but because of the nature of the road allowance through there, the ATVs actually go onto private property. So we have had some enforcement action trying to prevent people from leaving the side road there and going onto private property to the north and to the south. So we have had some challenges there, but it's been fairly light levels of use. So we do know there are ATVs that use that area, but to a fairly light extent in terms of through flow.
Thanks, Noel, for that. Any other follow-up? Yes, Mark Earl.
So I can agree with the comments made that if we take that bridge out and close it totally, that it'll never go back in. Just one thing that stood out for me was that the transportation, the usage on that road, that data comes from after we closed the bridge. So we really don't know how much it was being used prior to closing the bridge for people that didn't want to go up to County Road 5 north of it or County Road 16 south. So I think some of our data in there is a little skewed and not pertinent. The price tag bothers me, but again, if we close it, we'll never get it back, so. Thank you.
Councilor Winters.
And if I may, I was going to mention that point as well, but it's not a problem or a disadvantage, it's just the way that the environmental assessment is done at this point. But it doesn't include any community engagement in any public, if you went to the public and agricultural community right now and said, hey, we're talking about closing this permanently or building a bridge, we would get some feedback back. It's easy to say that we've got a lot of money to spend, we do. But we also have to look at all aspects of our municipality, including our residential, our recreational, and our agricultural community. We all know that Grey Road 16 is a major road. We know that the Keppel or the Grey Bruce Town Line is a major road. In the middle of harvest season, do you want to be taking that road or do you want to be taking the bypass, which I think this road was used on a regular basis for that regards. So it's just, at this point, my recommendation is that we don't make a decision. We defer it at this point in time and maybe take that extra funds that we have to look at some other options. There's got to be some other options that we can research a little more to see, is there is there a fix for a one-lane cantilever bridge? Is it a Bailey Bridge and Algonquin Bridge? Is it a wood structure bridge? I just think there's something here that we're not flipping every stone to make an informed decision on.
Councilor Winters. Councilor Coburn.
Yeah, I'm not opposed to getting more information. I'm not sure that I agree that the data is skewed in terms of usage of the road after it's been closed. I think the data that would be pertinent would be, were former users coming forward and having serious concerns and complaints. If they haven't, then that would suggest that they have found an alternative route that they're okay with. I don't mind deferring this with and looking at some alternatives, but I sure don't want to just kick this one down the road so that the next term of council has to make the hard decisions again. I also wonder if it isn't helpful to look at, like, we have all of these structures and bridges. And if we're deciding on these on a one-by-one basis, we're essentially setting a precedent. And without knowing about all of the other bridges and where some other needs and more pressing areas are, it's hard to make a decision on this one in isolation, or these two in isolation. So I do just make that that comment as a word of caution, I suppose. Thank you.
Thanks, Councilor Coburn. Yeah, well, we've been 6 years already kicking it down the road, so, you know, it's how time flies, right? All right, any further discussion from anybody? We do have a motion or a recommendation on the floor. If there's a change to that, do we want to address that now and vote? Councilor Winters?
I would put a motion on the floor that we defer this decision tonight, pending the investigation of some other options.
Seconder for that? Mayor Carlton? Nope, got a comment?
I'm just wondering if we could add to that public consultation with the people that would be using that out there.
Okay, should be able to do that. Charlie's scripting something there for us. So this has been an amendment then to the present recommendation.
For you, Deputy Mayor Pringle, it would be a motion to defer separate
Motion to defer.
apart from
Okay.
motion that stands.
Can we vote on it first, the motion to defer first? Okay, no.
For you, Deputy Mayor Pringle, point of quick clarity, if I may. So Councillor Winters, would your recommendation include considerations for non-road use, i.e. to consider this as a, look at this as a load restricted, width restricted bridge to accommodate just recreational use? Or would you prefer that your direction leave us to just look at, you know, a like-for-like sort of single lane agricultural use type bridge?
I'm open to any suggestion, but I mean, realistically, my focus on this one is not recreational use. It's more agricultural community, the traveling public, the motoring public. The recreation is a secondary use, especially when you say there isn't really a trail network down there and there's existing issues, if I may. But
Councillor Thompson?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I agree with Councillor Winters. I'm sorry I had to step away for an emergency work call, and I didn't want to restate everything or ask questions that I would have missed. But I agree with the public consultation, and I agree with us looking at potentially another alternative, because I think we have experience where we've gone ahead and closed a road, or we've made a move not understanding what the ramifications of that are going to be. So I do think it's important for us to have public consultation to know what the impact is going to be, and also, or not going to be, and also for us to look at some other alternatives. So thank you for that.
Thanks, Councillor Thompson. Further comments? All right, we do have a deferred recommendation on the floor. If we can get a vote on that,
I did.
Yeah, or the mayor.
it was kind of a question second.
Yeah.
All right, we do have a deferred recommendation on the floor we need to vote on. I'll call the vote. All those in favor? I can't see Councillor Thompson's hand, but I'm sure it's all four. Can't see Councillor Thompson. So, and to go back now to vote on the original recommendation.
No, we deferred it.
Oh, okay, we're done. We're done with that one?
Can
Okay.
you not see me?
No.
Sorry.
No, I can't see you, Ryan.
Well, my camera is on. I can see me. Kathy can see me.
Wait,
Just a sec. Let me see if I go out and back in again here.
there you are.
There.
And your vote was?
My vote was 4.
Thanks, Ryan.
Vote was 4. That's correct.
All right, let us pass. Thank you. All right, on to the second one, 8.2.2 DEV 2025-018 structure S005 structural load analysis. Recommendation reads the council receives staff report DEV 2025-18 structure S005 structural load analysis and consider the following recommendation: that council adopt alternative 4 of permanently closing and removing structure S005. I guess that's all the recommendation. I need a mover and a seconder. Councillor Coburn, Councillor Thompson. Kevin, you got comments to make on this one?
Yes, and thank you, Deputy Mayor Pringle, and to members of council. Again, I'll be pretty brief with this report. Jesse from Pearson's Engineering provided very high level overview of the structural load analysis and a few alternatives to consider tonight on council. What I do want to highlight is the background work that completed and Pearson's recommendation that due to the current bridge condition, it is recommended that the bridge is closed March 31st, 2025. Due to deteriorating conditions on the bridge deck, the lack of guide rails and the actual substructure itself, to reduce the township's liability, it is recommended that that bridge is closed until an alternative is considered and carried out. So as Jesse from Pearson Engineering provided, there is a few alternatives. One alternative is the do nothing. Obviously, the do nothing is there's no cost to the township. However, that bridge, because of its current condition, will essentially just be closed and remain closed for any recreational vehicles, pedestrian vehicles as such, again, to reduce any liability from the township. Alternative 2 is the short-term recommendation, and that includes the bridge deck rehabilitation, guide rail rehabilitation, and some substructure work as well. And that will get us to the 1 to 5 year lifespan. The long-term rehabilitation is, and I'm going to look to Jesse on this one, from my understanding, is the removal of that steel structure and place into another structure such as a Bailey Bridge option consideration. However, with that, you have to consider that the existing concrete on that existing substructure is going to have to undergo some rehabilitation in the near future, and considering if that existing concrete is adequate or not. So there's a lot to consider on that one as well. And again, the fourth alternative is to permanently close and remove that bridge. But obviously with the permanent removal, it will be very difficult to implement a new bridge. The fact that it's in the Niagara Escarpment Commission regulated area and the Grand GSE regulated area as well. So right now the recommendation is to adopt alternative 4, permanently close and remove the structures S005, but I do have to have that caveat that no matter what, the bridge is going to be closed March 31st to reduce the liability on the township.
Sure. Thanks, Kevin, for that. All right, we'll start the questions. Who wants to go first this time?
I don't want to go first, but I want to go first. So it's a great report. It's I think council needed to hear all of that, but there's a lot of background information here that's missing here. In 2016, that was a bridge owned by the county, and the county kept bridges because they were boundary roads between municipalities. Back in the day, council in 2016 knew there was an issue, with trails, knew that closing that bridge, removing that bridge was going to be an issue for trail networks and for environmental issues. Township took possession of the bridge from the county, They closed the bridge. There should be a bylaw saying that bridge is closed. That bridge is not a vehicle for traffic for roadways. It is not. It was a bridge for recreational vehicles only, and the only agreement that the township had was with the ATV club. And the ATV club was allowed to do what they did through permits with the Grace Harbor Conservation Authority and the NEC. It was gated. It had barricades. It had signs. It was, you couldn't get through there with a vehicle. It was for horses. It was for ATVs. Back in 2016, the Snowmobile Club had no interest in funding and helping the ATV club in doing it. So the ATV club did what they did. It was the locals that abused it and tried to push the barricades out of the way and cut the gates. But the approaches, it's not a roadway. It wasn't designed for hydro trucks. It wasn't designed for pickup trucks. It wasn't designed for cars. It was a bridge designed for ATVs. There was huge environmental issues there. The ATVs were going through the river. They sidestepped that. The county put barricades up. The ATVs made a mess of the river. It was, what's the best of the options? Keep them out of the river, keep them on the bridge. I get the bridge, as it states right now, has load restrictions in it, but I think we owe it to the club that stood up and tried to fix the environmental issues to give them the opportunity to say, what are we going to do? What's the short term? What's the long term goals of this? Reducing it back to 76 inches, putting a weight restriction out of 4 ton, putting the gates back up, putting the barricades back up seems to me like the short term solution. Doesn't seem like we should be closing a bridge and saying, hey, good luck, freewheel through the river again. We just repeat what happened in 2015, 2016. So I had to say that. I mean, reading this report, it was a good report. We need to know the structure. We need to know the conditions. We need to know some of the history that the Snowmobile Club took it upon themselves to widen the bridge. But we only had one agreement, the township, and I still believe that's the case, was with the ATV club. So somewhere along the lines, we don't supervise our agreements. We don't maintain our agreements. And when I read this, I was saying, why are we doing what we did on this recreational bridge and we didn't assess all the bridges on the rail trail, right? It's the same thing. It's the same use. This is not a road. It's not an unmaintained road. It's an open road. It always was an open road. It was seasonally maintained. There's key reasons why that bridge is there and why it was supporting the ATV club. But that bridge, in its state, 2016, when council of the day approved it, was for ATV use, horses, pedestrians only.
Your comments, yes, CEO.
So through you, Deputy Mayor Pringle, everything Councillor Winters has said is exactly accurate, with the exception of one thing. The rail trail bridges, for clarity, are OSIM inspection structures and have been inspected. We do inspect structures. Any structure meeting the OSIM regulations, regardless of whether it's on a trail or on a roadway, open or otherwise, is inspected. So we are inspecting the rail trail bridges.
Yep. All right, further comments? Councillor Coburn.
Thank you, Chair Pringle. I have to say I do have a little trouble hearing the words of our CAO. I wonder if it's because he has the unusual talent of being able to speak so quickly. So I'm not quite sure I got all of what you said, Niall. I guess if some of these passageways, these bridges, are meant for recreational use only, and we're moving towards more of a user pay system, and we expect recreational groups to help with the costs of some of these things, and it seems that Councillor Winters is indicating they have in the past. If this one is used for recreational use only, and I think you said by ATVs, then is, just like the playground in Kemble where people are fundraising for that recreation, is there any movement, suggestion, offer of assistance to help pay for that if it's purely a recreational trail?
Good comments, CAO. Well,
So through you, Deputy Mayor Pringle, please let me know if I don't come through loud and clear. My earlier comment was Councillor Winters is exactly accurate in everything he said. The sole area of clarity was we do inspect the rail trail bridges as well under the Ontario Structural Inspection Manual process. So we have an extraordinarily positive working relationship with South Bruce Peninsula ATV Club. We meet, as George mentioned, on a fairly regular routine basis. I suspect that if council was to direct us to look into one of the other options that have been put forward here, there would be a conversation around how best that might be funded. I'm not going to spend George's money for him, but South Bruce Peninsula have been extremely supportive in the past. And I am sure that there is grants that we could jointly apply for and ways in which we would be able to work together to look at the cost options. I think one of the things I would say from a staff-based perspective is just from a liability perspective, whilst the bridge is closed, it is still the township's bridge. And so I suspect it would be ideal if we could do the work in partnership with South Bruce Peninsula ATV Club, rather than leaving a user group to pick up the pieces of working on a piece of infrastructure for the township. But we certainly do have good working agreements, and George and the ATV Club have been amazing over the last couple of years in helping maintain the rail trail. And so I'm sure there are possibilities we could look at there if council was keen to explore one of the alternative options in front of you tonight.
Thank you for that, Al. Further comments? So the recommendation that's on the floor now is for adopt alternative number 4 to permanently close and remove the structure as 005. If there's appetite to change that, then we need to put a motion or defer that option out there, Councilor Winters.
So I would put a motion on the floor that, you know, the bridge, you know, the barricades be reestablished, the signage be reestablished, the safe working load limit of, is it 4 ton maximum limit be installed immediately, and that the ATV club and the township work together to minimize the width of that bridge so that it is only ATVs, it is not, and then work together to come up with an agreement. What's the plan? Is there grants out there for the township, for the ATV club? What is the overall thing? But closing that and removing that bridge right now and shutting that off, I think is going to cause us more of a detrimental headache than what it's worth. I think we need to sit down and work with the user groups. It's interesting. I mean, Mr. Angel made a comment that, you know, the snowmobile club, they can relocate. So we're not worried about the snowmobile club. The snowmobile club is the one that caused the issues with widening the bridge. And maybe, you know, between the ATV club and the snowmobile club, maybe there's a cost sharing there where they can put it back the way it was. But there's things that I think that we need to sit down and work with these groups to come up with a usable solution. And is that a 5-year plan? Is that a 10-year plan? Is that, what is that? Are they going to reinstate it for 5 years and then come up with a long-term plan with grant funding? But I think right at the moment, I'd like to give direction that, you know, the safety measures be implemented, the bridge stay open, and that the user groups sit down and come up with a working plan with township staff.
Just, okay, well, I'll let you comment first, I'll get a second.
Yeah, so through you, Deputy Mayor Pringle, before a motion goes on the floor. So at this point, we have a recommendation. The structure has, in essence, reached the end of its life. The steel has been load restricted since December to prevent the use of the bridge by groomers. We have a firm engineering recommendation that the bridge as it currently sits, even if we were to reinstate the gates and restrict the width, should not be in use until such a time as we come up with that plan. Now we can come up with that plan, I suspect, relatively quickly, but just I wanted to make sure that we were clear. We have a very clear recommendation that bridge should be closed to all use, including ATV, pedestrian, horse, and anything else, effective essentially immediately. Whilst we can take some time to look at next steps, which might even be able to be implemented later this year, the recommendation we have at this point is that the bridge be closed. We can certainly defer the removal and look at other options, but I just wanted to be clear that we're not.
Thanks, Al.
Just a clarification, and I know it's not protocol to ask our guest speaker to declare, but I was under the impression that it was maximum of 4 ton with the steel structure that's there if the wooden deck was replaced. That's what I took out of that conversation.
That is correct. So if the wood deck is replaced and the barrier system is rehabilitated, the existing steel superstructure has a load carrying capacity of 4 tons. And with that minor rehabilitation option, we're saying that service life for that bridge would be extended to the 5 to 10 year mark.
No.
And to you, Deputy Mayor Pringle, my point is we can't do that by March the 31st. So there will have to be a period of some closure while we arrange for those works to occur.
Councilor Winters?
And I get that, but if that taking and timing and planning that work takes you into the summer months, we will be inundated with calls and complaints about the river. My suggestion that we work closely with the clubs to see what they can do very quickly and fast. The original agreement was for the club to do all the work and supply liability insurance for the municipality. don't know why we wouldn't let the club rehabilitate what they currently own and are currently responsible for based under that agreement.
CEO?
So through you, Deputy Mayor Pringle, and I'm going to caveat that with my ensuing response with, I am speaking because I have to protect the liability of the township. So I say this from that position. The bridge is ours. Yes, we have an operating agreement which provides for very specific use. I never want to see an agreement lead to the township entering into a legal battle with a partner that it works positively with. And at this point in time, if anyone other than an ATV has an incident on that bridge, and anyone other than an ATV, which is a member of South Bruce Peninsula ATV Club, has an incident on that bridge, the township has some liabilities. So I'm very much for working in partnership. I think it should be, my recommendation would be that the township owns this bridge. We own the road allowance that the bridge sits within, which is an open road allowance, whilst the bridge is quite correctly closed. It would be my recommendation from a liability perspective that the township be the lead of any work to clarify the relationship. That does nothing to undermine the relationship we have with South Bruce Peninsula ATV Club and working in partnership, but that would be, from a liability perspective, that would be my recommendation. And I feel it is incumbent upon me in my role to put that one on the floor, even though I know it may complicate matters.
Thanks for that. Mayor Carlton.
So my understanding of the second option of getting it to a 10-ton limit is that would be being done to allow the snowmobile club to take their groomer over it. If we're fixing the Emery Bridge, is it not possible to divert the snowmobile club away from there? So the Emery Bridge is already on for replacement, so we're moving the snowmobile club off of there so we can go with the lower 4-ton and facilitate.
Yes, you.
So I see you, Deputy Mayor Pringle. Yes, we have had that conversation with Stone Keppel. They have confirmed that they're quite happy to move their trail. Emery Bridge will be reopened, and they believe there's plenty of space for them to use Cabell Side Road instead. So they're quite happy to rescind interest in this bridge.
So we're really looking at option number 2 is where we'd be going back to the 4-ton maximum load limit, 5 to 10 year. Is that what we're really looking like? Is that the option we're looking at?
That's the realistic option right now.
Right.
For the near interim.
Right.
To mitigate what I would consider environmental issues and complaints from the trail users. But I think there needs to be a longer term solution at some point in time. And is that an agreement through the municipality and or the club saying there's grant money out there to do whatever? But I think in the interim, I was part of the calls, the complaints, the environmental issues, and hang on, because they will happen.
Right. All right. Where am I? Kearney gets recommendation. Secondary recommendation there. That we didn't get a second round yet though either. I'm just lost for words of what it should say. We're just crafting some words here for the recommendation.
Why, maybe we're waiting just to generate conversation. Item number 3 on the memorandum of understanding, I think, gives the CAO the comfort level that the club has already been appointed to do all the maintenance, signage, all of that stuff themselves, keep liability insurance, naming the municipality as additional insured. I don't believe anywhere this is like a free-for-all. It is clearly identified and it is there to work together. But timing isn't the issue. You know, if this drags on to the fall, there will be issues.
Yes,
Just
Councillor Day.
if I may present, I fully understand what you're saying, and I know that when ATVs go through water, people will talk about it from various perspectives. I also know that should something go wrong on that bridge, then that would be a source of complaint and worry as well. So I appreciate the engineering work and the perspectives on the safety of users on that bridge. And while hard, closing the bridge temporarily, if it's keeping people safe, is not all that.
All good comments. We definitely want to look out for the people in the township and municipality.
But through you, Deputy Mayor Pringle, I think if the, I'll wait for the clerk to put words to Councillor Winter's thoughts for a recommendation. I suspect we can move through fairly quickly the next steps towards the minor rehabilitation.
Thank you. Let's currently make a note.
Thanks, Deputy Mayor, through you. I think my recommendation in this case would actually be to consider the motion that's on the floor and defeat it.
Okay.
And then a new motion could be put on the floor, because this is a separate recommendation from what presently exists. Just for clarity, I think it would be important not to conflate the two options and to have them stand alone.
Okay, so you want me to do the vote on the original one? Okay.
Procedurally, if we do that, can we still talk about it?
Yes.
Or do we have to talk about it first and put an amending motion on the floor first?
Through you. So at this point in time, I do have something crafted, which we can put on the floor immediately preceding defeating the motion that's on the floor.
Okay.
If that's all.
Okay. All right, so,
Yeah. With me, right?
Thinking about it, we don't have an amendment on the floor for that motion, so if we defeat it,
Through you. So we'll be defeating the motion that presently exists, but then immediately putting another motion on the floor reflective of the discussion that we just had. And then discussion is reopened at that point in time.
Defeat the first motion. If they can, the first motion.
So we don't want to permanently remove the bridge.
We don't know that because I haven't put the hands up. That's a long second.
we'll just defer.
I think is that your concern, Councillor Winters? Yes.
because we want to vote the first one down. So we want to have an amendment in place that we vote on, and then we vote the first one down.
That's not how it works.
I don't know if Karen, whatever Karen says.
I'll leave it to you. So the impression that I'm getting is that there is not a desire to permanently close and remove the structure. So you will be voting that motion down.
That's an assumption at this point in time, that there's a unanimous desire not to,
Right,
but we haven't voted.
correct. So you could take the vote on that motion and put the direction to staff that you would like in place. The thing is that amendments shouldn't be a direct opposition to the recommendation that's on the floor. But if you would like to do this as.
Still a recommendation within the report.
Correct.
Still one of the options, so I don't see it as a direct opposition to. We're choosing a different recommendation.
Review, it's actually the wording of the motion that's on the floor recommends the permanent closing and removal, which is what is on the floor for consideration, and therefore recommending anything in direct opposite to would not be appropriately dealt with as an amendment.
I agree with Councillor Winters, though. what he's suggesting is one of the options within the report. The recommendation is just picking one option. We're choosing a different one.
Oh, Councillor Coburn?
I'm supporting what Carly is saying. The recommendation is written before us, and we have always considered that to be like the motion. And in the past, we've either voted to approve it, not approve it, defer it, or amend it. So I don't see any other alternative other than voting on this. If we so choose to vote it down, then put a different motion on the floor afterwards.
Thank you. Councillor Thompson?
No, I was just going to say the same thing. We've got a motion on the floor. I don't think we want an amendment that's opposite to the motion. Let's just vote on the motion and then make our play from there.
Okay. So back to the original motion that we had on the floor, which was to adopt 4 of permanently closing and removing structure S005. There's no further discussion. I'm going to call the vote. All those in favor?
Could you call for a recorded vote, please?
Recorded vote? Gotcha.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. For you, when I call your name, please indicate your vote for or against. Councillor Tobin Day,
Against.
Councillor Rick Winters,
Against.
Councillor Ryan Thompson.
Muted there, Ryan.
Thompson,
Opposed.
Councillor Kathleen Moore Coburn,
Opposed.
Mayor Stu Carleton,
Opposed.
and Deputy Mayor.
Opposed?
That motion is defeated.
Okay. So now we have another recommendation on the floor, which you have crafted.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Pringle, through you. Just based on the discussion, I would recommend that a motion could read that council receive staff report DEV 2025-18 structure S-005 structural load analysis and consider the following recommendation. That council adopt alternative 2 to rehabilitate structure S-005 and that the bridge be temporarily closed as recommended until such time as the structure is rehabilitated.
Do I have a mover and a seconder? Councillor Winters? Mayor Carleton? Discussion? Not seeing any hands. I'm going to call the vote. Oh, so Councillor Day, no, go ahead.
I withdraw.
Okay. I was wondering though, do we need to put in there the minor rehabilitation? No, just leave it the way it is. Okay. Okay, I'm going to call the vote then. All those in favor? That is carried. Thank you. All right. All right, 7.3, public inquiries. Any person wishing to appear before council? Read all? No? Read that one. Read that one. Okay, any person who wishes to appear before council in question, inquiry must register with the clerk's office. Register, you can register it or complete the online delegation form, www.georgiabluffs.ca/delegations, or call the clerk's office at 519-376-2729, extension 601, or register at the council chambers with the clerk prior to the meeting starting at 5 p.m. And there is none. All right, recommendation reports, 8.1, Office of the CAO, 8.1.1, CAO 2025-12, awarding of RFP 2025-05, non-union pay equity and compensation review. Recommendation reads that RFP 2025-05, non-union pay equity and compensation review be awarded to Gallagher Benefit at the cost of $32,459.25, and that council endorse the municipal comparator matrix detailed within. Need a mover and a seconder? Councilor Winters, Councilor Thompson, and Brittany.
Thank you. And through your chair, Deputy Mayor, As included in the report, RFP 2025-05, seeking external consulting services to complete the non-union and compensation pay equity review, closed on January 27th. This project was also approved through your annual budget discussions over the course of 2025. As noted within the report as well, it was budgeted at a cost of $35,000. As also detailed within the report, 8 submissions were received for the publicized tender. Those 8 submissions were then filtered through a 2-phased review process, first being technical scoring and then second being financial scoring. Gallagher Benefit, being the recommended awarded party, scored both the highest on the technical portion and quoted the lowest project budget. Thereby, they are the recommended successful party. You'll see throughout the report, Gallagher Benefit has a lot of local experience and will bring that to the project should they be the successful party this evening. The second portion of this report details a comparator matrix, as we've called it, to select municipal comparators for use throughout the pay equity and market check process. The comparator matrix is what I've dubbed a data-based way to generate comparators by looking at budget scores or totals, comparing ourselves to those within the Ontario Living Wage catchment that the township also exists within. The matrix is a weighted matrix, thereby assigning more importance to some matrix over others. And following the scoring process as described within the report, those municipal comparators that score the highest will then form the municipal comparator group of 10 to 12 municipalities for use throughout the pay equity and market check. So we're using data-based metrics to compare ourselves to municipalities throughout the province. So we will use a wide scale of municipalities to flow through this scoring process and then use the highest scoring municipalities to compare ourselves to. Now, I've taken an initial draft at creating a matrix and including metrics within that matrix. It is council is welcome at this point to amend the matrix as you see fit, delete metrics, amend their weighting, include additional metrics for comparison. This is your decision. It is a matrix that I want you to be comfortable with as we move through the market check process. So with that, Deputy Mayor, I welcome any questions.
Good. Thanks, Bernie, for that. Good report. Questions from the council? Oh, Councillor Coburn.
Thank you, Chair Pringle. I do have a few questions. I appreciate the work that's gone into this so far. I don't know if this is a fair statement or not, but I'm going to make it anyway. I, as council, would have liked to have been part of the selection process for the consultant. We were left out of that process last time around, and I had concerns, and I feel like we've been left out of it again. But having said that, what's done is done. I do have some concerns about the metrics that are being used for comparators. And I have done this, I have been involved in this kind of an exercise beyond my council experience. And I think when we think about comparators for staff salaries and comparators for Georgian Bluffs, we are looking at what makes us competitive and who are our competitor areas geographically. So although I appreciate the metrics that's been suggested, I think it's more complicated than it needs to be, and I'm not entirely sure that some of the factors are part of what makes us competitive in salary at all. And I am quite happy to be corrected on that if I'm wrong. A more simplistic view that's generally taken is, what's our population size? You've got that in there. That's probably number one. What's the geographic location? So the proximity to the township that makes us within a distance that's easily commutable. So we're not going to look at Collingwood because most people are not going to drive for over an hour to get to work. So it doesn't have to be just Grey County. It can be Bruce County as well. But it's within a reasonable driving distance. And I believe it needs to be all lower tier. In the past, we've looked at county salaries, and that to me is not a comparator for a lower tier municipality, especially a small one at all. So I also don't think we want to just compare ourselves to others that are achieving the 60th percentile or higher, because that will skew the results. We want to know, where are we within our competitive area, geographically and size-wise. So help me understand how things like an average home assessment or a living wage catchment has anything to do with how much we pay our staff. If they're doing the same job, then I would think that their salaries are totally independent of how much, what the average living wage is or the average home assessment. So for me, I see the important ones as population size, geographic location within a reasonable driving distance of our township, and lower tier, which you have in here as scope of service, I think. Generally, lower tier would be a different scope of service than an upper tier. Beyond that, I don't have any clue as to why we would consider the size and type of road network, the different types of services we offer, our staff complement, home assessments, and the living wage catchment. I think it's too complicated. My own opinion is that this is more of an intuitive exercise. We know our geographic area. We know which municipalities we're competing with, and those ought to be the ones that we're choosing as comparators. Those are my thoughts just in regards to the metrics being used. So I don't know if you have some thoughts on that, any staff member, but particularly Brittany, I guess.
Thanks, Councilor Coburn. Yes, Brittany.
Thank you. A couple of things. So in selection of the recommended successful party, we did move through the scoring process that is used for all RFPs. We simply recommend the highest scoring proponent out of that process. And that's the process that we follow for all RFPs. So it was definitely not our intention to leave council out of selecting that party. That's just the township's procedure as far as procurement goes and awarding these things. For the comparator matrix, the metrics were generated through consulting other reviews that have been completed throughout the province. You'll note that I didn't include the type and scale of the road network, because I too agree that that seems a little redundant for inclusion. The thought behind the comparator matrix was simply just approaching comparison from a data perspective, in noting that council, specifically within this term, has been quite reliant and focused upon making data-driven decisions. So we simply just leaned upon data-driven decisions and tried our best to capture it within this matrix. The Ontario Living Wage Catchment and the average home assessment speak to the direct affordability of this area and the cost required to remain a resident here. So that's why we selected them and granted them such a high weighting, simply because they speak to the direct affordability of remaining within the area of Georgian Bluffs. And as far as driving distance goes, we did try to capture that within the geographic location as Councillor Coburn highlighted. But I will say that, you know, it's no secret that I commute from Collingwood. We have staff that commute from Wasabi Beach now, and we have staff that commute from as far as Walkerton. So I think those boundaries are being pushed farther and farther, especially as, you know, through COVID, remote work became a possibility. But as I say, it is, council is welcome to amend this matrix or completely move away from it. If we feel that, you know, we know our local municipalities are our best comparators, then we're happy to move away from the matrix if that's council's wish.
Further comments? Oh, Councillor Coburn.
Sorry, if I could just follow up on that. I agree that we're looking for data, but we have to be looking for the right data. I appreciate those responses. I don't think it needs to be this complicated, but whatever council as a whole decides is, I guess, fine with me. But I do wish to encourage council to ask that we see the comparators, the list of comparators, and those be approved before we start into the consultant's work. We want to make sure that we're using the right comparators. Otherwise, I can tell you the data will be skewed right off the hop, and we want to be able to rely on that data. So I would just ask that that be part of it, and perhaps that's a consideration that you've already decided upon, Brittany, or have a recommendation on, is that we get to see those comparators and approve it prior to the work being done.
Thanks, Councillor Coburn. Brittany?
In response to that, it was our suggested course that by approval of the matrix, we would then go away and work with the consultants to define the comparators for use throughout the market check without seeking council's approval for those 10 to 12 municipalities. Should council wish to pivot away from that, I'm happy to generate a matrix upon onboarding of the consultant and have it brought back, if that's council's wish.
Thank you. Councillor Day?
I would be interested in seeing which municipalities end up being our comparators before the final decision is made. For me, the one thing that jumps out on the comparative matrix, I actually thought a lot about it at AMO last August, is small urban. I've never fully understood why Georgian Bluffs is classified as small urban as an AMO designation. I find when I'm at the small urban lunches, I'm seated with people from Kingston and Peterborough and Meaford, and more comparable municipalities in my mind are in the rural municipal lunches. So I would be, that's the one line that jumps out to me as one that may not be fully representative of who we are.
Comments? Yeah, Randy.
Thank you. And through generating the data for the matrix, we would expand upon those types of services. This was simply demonstrative of the scope of information that's available, I guess, readily available online. We'd be looking at, you know, level of bylaw enforcement services, or, you know, the level of customer service, that type of stuff. As Councillor Coburn indicated, the level of service provided by a upper tier is vastly different than us. The AMO classifications just attempt to consolidate all of that information, but I am happy to remove it should you wish, or I guess redefine it into class or tier of operation, i.e. a city is much larger than a township and vice versa. So it could be just reclassified as municipal designation.
Comments? Councillor Coburn?
Thank you. Yeah, I'm just going to go back to choosing the criteria for the comparators. In my experience, the consultants typically work with council to determine the criteria. And from that, the comparators are chosen. So here I'm seeing again, and this was, I guess, my concern with the last process, that is all being done by staff largely. And I think that, I don't want to suggest that that's a conflict of interest, but it could certainly be seen as that by our ratepayers. I have worked with consultants outside of this arena, and it is their job to meet with council and develop those criteria such that we have an approved list of comparators, and that council has a hand in having input into those decisions. So I do have some concerns about this process.
Thank you. Follow up? Okay, further questions? I guess if I was thinking of like on comparator side of things, to me, we're looking at Aaron Elversley, Musgrave, Chatsworth, Meaford as the locals, and then you said it could have up to 12, right? In my mind, those would be 4 that I'd be keying on, and then pick another 8 other comparators out there and see what's going on. That was kind of where I went with it all, was just in the local vicinity. That's who I would probably look at for numbers, and then bring on the other 8 and see what you come up with. So, and then you could take it from there, but that was just my thought on it. So, on that piece of it. But any other comments? Councillor Day?
This is obviously something I haven't had the opportunity to have much experience in. For other municipalities, is picking the comparators and working with the consultants something that staff normally do, or council is normally involved in, just to avoid that perceived conflict of risk or conflict of interest? We have a committee that doesn't include council look at council salary, so.
I would suggest it's likely a little bit of both. The larger you get, the more it is completely external consultant that does it. Given the scope of the work and the project dedicated to it, we're simply looking to minimize costs. And honestly, in drafting the comparator matrix, I was hoping to address the concerns that were brought out of the 2021 review and bringing it back down to a database decision for council. But what I'm hearing is generally council would be more comfortable with seeing the comparators before the work is commenced. So with a simple amendment to the motion, I'd be happy to do that upon onboarding of the successful party.
Further comments? Would somebody like to make an amendment to the main motion there to go that direction, or are we just going to vote on one way? Can I see your hand up there, Councillor Coburn?
Oh, sorry, I thought you were asking for someone to make that amendment.
I thought I seen you put your hand up.
She's moving me.
Okay, very good. Still missing. Okay, I need a seconder for that motion.
The amendment.
Sorry, to the amended motion, yes. Okay, yes. Councillor Winters?
So, sorry, I got confused there. So did we amend the motion?
We're amending we're going to amend the motion to look at further.
Thank you.
Sorry, Brittany can say it better than me.
We're amending the motion to add direction to have the 10 to 12 highest scoring municipalities brought back for council's consideration prior to commencing the market check and pay equity process.
Thank you.
Okay. So we have that amended motion on the floor. I'm going to call the vote. All those in favor? That is carried. And back to the main motion, which had been amended. I'm going to call for a vote on the main motion. All those in favor? And that is carried. Okay. Development infrastructure, 8.2.3 DEV 2025-19, deeming bylaw and quick claim for Marguerite Heidolf. Recommendation reads, it has been demonstrated that the proposed application is consistent with the provincial planning statement 2024, conforms with the Niagara Escarpment Plan, conforms with the county official plan, complies with the general intent and purpose of the township zoning bylaw 2020-020. As such, it is recommended that council direct township staff to proceed with the quit claim, which delivers a transfer of normal consideration to the owner in respect of Louise Street as prescribed in Plan 180 and identified by PIN 37023-0312 LT. And council passes a bylaw deeming Plan 180 to not be a registered plan of subdivision for the purpose of Section 50-3 in accordance with Section 50-4 of the Planning Act. I need a mover and a seconder. Councilor Winters. Mark Carlton. And I am going to Rebecca. Rebecca, you got comments?
Yes, thank you. Through you, Mayor, Deputy Mayor Pringle. I have a couple comments to make just on this application before it moves forward. This item is on the agenda tonight concerning a deeming bylaw and a quick claim that are required for an application for consent for residential lot creation to proceed before the Committee of Adjustment. This application was submitted to the Township in late 2023 and proposes to create a new residential lot on the lands municipally addressed as 501241 Grey Road 1. Mr. Benner presented a report to the Committee of Adjustment in December of 2024, where he did recommend approval of the proposed lot creation subject to a number of conditions, which were discussed before the committee at that public hearing. As noted in Mr. Benner's report to the Committee of Adjustment, the subject lands are located within a registered plan of subdivision, being Plan 180, which was deposited on title to the property in the early 1900s and continues to appear as a registered plan of subdivision on the title. At that public hearing that was held in December of last year, agents for the applicant attended virtually to provide an overview of the application and to note deregistration of the plan of subdivision prior to proceeding with the proposed lot creation by severance. Members of the committee requested some additional information regarding the process involved with deregistering the plan of subdivision and requested additional clarification regarding certain conditions of approval which were recommended by township staff. Ultimately, the committee moved to defer the application to allow for those additional details to be provided. Prior to the committee further considering that application, and that's application B0524, a deeming bylaw is first required, given that the subject lands are within a registered plan of subdivision in accordance with the requirements of the Planning Act. The Plan 180 also contemplates two public roads, one being Winter Street and the second being Louise Street, which were historically conveyed to the public authority having jurisdiction. And while Winter Street is currently operating as a public road allowance, Louise Street has been historically treated as a private road under the High Elf's care for many years, despite these lands having been dedicated to the public authority having jurisdiction at the time of the plan's registration in about 1903. A quick claim is proposed by the applicant to formally recognize the High Elf's historic maintenance and use of Louise Street as a private road. The applicant did provide some supporting documentation to assist township staff in review of the file, including a proposed severance plan, a legal survey of the lands, and parcel registers for both the lands which are currently developed for residential use and the lands comprising Louise Street. The applicants also supplied the township with a legal opinion provided by Aird & Berlis, which outlines the proposed approach and rationale to resolve this matter within the context of the subdivision control requirements of the Planning Act. So the report before you this evening provides some additional background information about subdivision control and approvals in Ontario. And notably, the Planning Act does require that where lands cannot be where lands are described within a registered plan of subdivision, such as Plan 180 in this case, these lands cannot be further subdivided through a consent application unless the lands have been deemed not part of the registered plan of subdivision or the plan itself is deemed not to be a registered plan of subdivision for the purposes of the Act. So this deeming bylaw and the quitclaim are required for the proposed lot creation and associated residential development to proceed on the subject lands as is permitted by the PPS on rural lands in a municipality. And so without a deeming bylaw in full force and effect, essentially the lots can't be further subdivided without contravening the Act. And so based on our review and the legal opinion that was provided by the applicant, we would recommend that Council adopt a deeming bylaw to deem the plan not a plan of subdivision, a registered plan of subdivision that is for the purposes of Section 51 of the Act. And furthermore, that the quitclaim would allow the township to essentially cede ownership of those lands for their continued use and maintenance, formally to recognize them as a private road under the High Dolph's care and maintenance. I will note that the Committee of Adjustment will ultimately be responsible for deciding on the application for residential lot creation. However, the deeming bylaw and quitclaim are required as a first step before that consent application can be further considered by the committee at a later date. I'll also note that Ms. Barrett is attending tonight to represent the applicant and may wish to speak to this matter further before we move to answer any questions that Council may have regarding the deeming bylaw or the quitclaim. I'd also be happy to answer any questions regarding the recommendation report that's before you this evening, if you have any. Thank you.
Thanks, Rebecca, for that information on that. Questions from Council? Mayor Carlton.
Thank you. I have one. So when I look at the map that shows the lands to be severed, it looks like the Louise Street runs directly through the middle of that. So does that mean then that that would create a natural severance again on that one lot? So it would actually be two lots? Because I can't imagine somebody wanting to buy a lot that has a road basically going through the middle of it.
Through you, Deputy Mayor Pringle, to Mayor Carlton, I believe what you might be referring to is the public shoreline allowance that runs through the lands to be retained. Is that the case?
No, when I look at that and it shows where the lands to be severed are, it looks to me like Louise Street runs right through the middle of that, going through the section of red to the existing buildings in the green section. Public shoreline is further over to the left-hand side of that.
Is it perhaps the easement that you're referring to?
Nope.
No, sorry.
If I may also speak to the same issue, I was having a very hard time understanding the maps because looking at the maps, I happen to be driving past many times over the last few days. It's very difficult to distinguish where Winter Street is and Louisa Street. I looked at Google Maps and Winter Street does not do what it says it does in the Plan of Subdivision 180 and Louisa Street historic map document. It's Louise Street, according to Google Maps, which may be completely wrong. I fully recognize that it runs down to a manufacturing plant and Winter Street is curved. So I remain quite confused about where Louise Street is.
Comments, Rebecca?
There is some additional information, some background information in the report that was presented to the Committee of Adjustment, some historical background on Plan 180 and Louisa Street. That report was authored by Mr. Benner. So in his absence, I've brought this forward to you for consideration. I will also note that the applicant's representative, Ms. Barrett, is here and might have something to share before I comment further. So I'll defer to you first and then I can add comments afterwards.
Ms. Barrett?
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Deputy Mayor. So historically, the reason why we're here, if I can start off with that, and the reason why this matter has come to council with this request for the deeming bylaw to deregister the plan and also the quitclaim with respect to Louise Street is because of the age of this Plan 180 and the fact that it was registered in 1903, but was never actually built out. So you're not the only ones that are a little confused about what we see on the plan that's registered on title and then what we see in reality. And that's exactly why we're here and exactly why we're looking for these technical approval of these technical instruments or technical direction from council to clean up this title. So that's what we're trying to do here. So you're exactly correct. I'm sorry, I didn't see who asked the question about Louise Street, but Louise Street on Plan 180, and if you pull up the actual plan of subdivision, which was one of the attachments to the report, Louise Street runs directly through what was planned as the historic subdivision and never built out because it was intended to service those new small lots. And Louise Street has never been used as a public street. In fact, I believe Ms. Elphick referenced in her presentation and in the report, my client's been paying taxes, municipal taxes on it for some years. So it exists legally. We pulled title, the township owns it, technically, but everyone thinks that it's my client that owns and has been using it. And so we're just looking to clean that up. So you won't, I don't think, actually see Louise Street in real life. If you go there, you would only see Winter Street, which runs from Gray Road down to the water, as I understand it. I hope that assists.
Thank you. CEO.
Through you, Deputy Mayor Pringle, I think the plan that was being referenced there is labelled item 3 on the agenda, survey 612-64272.1. It's a PDF document. You'll see that Louise Street is labelled on there.
So it's not there? Is that where we're...
It doesn't functionally exist, no. But Louise Street, as marked on that survey plan, is a road allowance that is currently owned by the Township of Georgian Bluffs. It has never been used as a...
So where is this piece they're calling Louise Street that is being used by Idolls and has been maintained by them?
That piece.
So it goes through the lot that's, so I'm right, it goes right through the middle of the piece to be severed. So does that then create 2 more lots, one on either side of it? No.
May I answer that question?
Yep, go ahead.
Through you, Deputy Mayor. The reason why we're doing this in sequence is that first we're getting the quit claim on Louise Street, so it will cease to exist. And therefore you will have one large, huge big lot owned by the Heidolfs, which again, in fact had merged on title. So the severance itself that they're seeking, just by way of background, is only because they purchased the adjacent lot. And technically, when you own 2 adjacent lots in the same name, they merge on title under Ontario law. So that's what occurred here. When Louise Street is transferred via quitclaim, or if council decides to do that to my client, then all of the lands will merge. You'll get one big piece once again that will be clean. And then the plan of subdivision, which as I've said is very old and messy, I'll just say that, with respect to its validity, it will be deregistered from title. So it won't exist anymore. We won't have to worry about that because that gives rise to all sorts of other complications. And again, you'll just have this one big piece of property that my client will then take to the committee of, or has taken to the committee of adjustment subject to these conditions. But in any event, we want council's direction with respect to these conditions before going back to the committee. And then you'll have just a clean severance to go back to the one big property that has the historic plan 180 on it and Louise Street and everything else. And then the retained portion would be the original, the green portion, I believe, in the plan that is before you. The green portion is lands to be retained. That's where my client resides currently. And then the red would be truly that just one solid red block without Plan 180, without Louise Street on it.
Thank you. CEO.
So for you, Deputy Mayor Pringle, to the Mayor, I think now if you look at the plan which has the green and red hashed areas, if you support the quit claim and handing and the deregistration of the plan of subdivision, the green and the red become a singular parcel which will then be severed to the green and the red. So the deregistration takes you back to one large parcel with one house on it, which the client, the applicant then will sever into 2 new lots.
So I think my question really is how, when we get to then the red and the green again as 2 separate lots, how is the green section, how are they getting to that? Where are they getting access to that property off of? That's the part that has me
I have
confused.
a practical.
Yeah, go ahead.
Can we project,
Through you,
sorry.
sorry.
I was just wondering if we could project the maps we're talking about. One of them keeps crashing on my device. And it might be easier for communication if we're all looking at the same map at the same time. That was all.
Okay, go ahead. You had a comment, Megan?
Through you, Deputy Mayor Pringle, both the lands to be severed and the lands to be retained have frontage on Grey Road 1, and the lands to be severed also have frontage along Winter Street, which is maintained as a public road allowance. So in essence, as Ms. Barrett had pointed out, the purpose of the consent application or the lot creation that's proposed that will be considered by the Committee of Adjustment is to reestablish the lot boundaries that existed prior to those lands unintentionally merging under common ownership under that earlier process. So it's essentially the first step would be to, as Ms. Barrett put it, to clean up the historic Plan 180 that was registered in the early 1900s, and then we would be able to then consider severing the parcels then back into two separate lots, which would both have frontage on Grey Road 1, and in the case of the lands to be severed, would have frontage on Winter Street for access.
Thanks, Rebecca. CEO.
Through you, Deputy Mayor Pringle, to the Mayor's earlier question, the existing resident, which would be on the lands to be retained, the green lands in future, already has frontage on Grey Road 1 and has two accesses already established onto Grey Road 1. So whilst Louise Street is there, it is not the primary access, it's not even a secondary access to the existing dwellings. Existing dwellings have access and frontage on Grey Road 1.
Okay, thank you. And that's what was confusing me, because it was mentioning they had been maintaining Louise Street and it sounded like they were using that as their access. So if they're off Grey Road 1, that's fine. Thank you.
And if we were to go back to Mayor Carlton's initial question, if we compare this map to attachment number 3, Louise Street does appear to run parallel to the shore through the red hatch mark area. So just making that connection between creating two parcels separated by a road. Do you feel, I'm not sure I understood the explanation entirely.
So if that road then obviously ran through there to facilitate the original plan of subdivision that had been applied for. And what we're doing is getting rid of all of that plan of subdivision, so then Louise Street is not required. So that then can go to being one large lot.
Louise Street was never established.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It was on paper.
It just went in.
Yeah.
Right.
Sorry. That shouldn't have been difficult.
I think it does speak to the value of understandable maps, though, which let you see like all of the details that are in here on the other, not all of the details, that's too many, but a few more details would have helped.
Let's move in there. Any further comments from council? I think we all understand what's happening now. All right, I'm going to call the vote. All those in favor? That is carried. Thanks, Rebecca and Megan, for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you. Have a good evening.
All right. DEB 2025-20 OSIM Progress Report and Budget Amendment. Recommendation reads: the council receives staff report DEB 2025-020 OSIM Progress Report and Budget Amendment, and the council amend the existing approved budget of $44,370 excluding HST to $53,370 excluding HST to be funded from the bridge reserve. I need a mover and seconder. Councilor Day, Mayor Carlton, Gavin, we're on to you again.
Thank you. And through you, Deputy Mayor Pringle, to members of council, again, just trying to give you a little brief update with the OSIM report and the budget amendment. So staff procured RFP 2024 awarded biannual OSIM and asset management in February 2024, and retained Pearson Engineering for the years of 2024 to the years 2026 to complete the OSIM inspections, the Ontario Structural Inspection Manual on our structures, in the amount of $44,370. When Pearson initially conducted their original 2024 OSIM, they found 8 additional structures. These structures were significant in cost, replacement value, and significant in the assets of the township, which was recommended for Pearson to add them to the OSIM inspections. So just because the initial upfront cost for them to complete the 2024 inspections, it was an additional $6,000. However, they've already collected most of the data. They know where the additional structures are located on a map. So the biannual OSIM in 2026 will be reduced to $3,000. So the budget amendment right now is an amount of $9,000, additional $9,000. Also, with the completed OSIMs, Pearson's completed the 10-year capital forecast. As previously noted from Pearson's presentation earlier this evening, that the township is looking at approximately $19 million worth of rehabilitation and replacements in the next 10 years. So there is a significant cost per year to maintain our assets and replace and rehabilitate some of the structures. Some of the additional structures that were found, I must mention as well, were some of the rail trail structures, which to the best of my knowledge were previously never investigated. And of course, the Keppel Sarawak Town Line Bridge that we were discussing this evening. Additional structures that were added to the OSIM 2024 and 2026 inspections is, for example, double corrugated steel pipes in Kemble. These are located on Kemble Rock Road. If council recalls from our tour in late 2024, we stopped in Kemble at the intersection. So these culverts are significant in size and in cost, replacement value, and they essentially have failed. If you look at the report, the OSIM reports, there essentially is no bottom to these culverts. So again, just because the additional upfront cost to investigate these additional structures, $6,000 for 2024, an additional $3,000 in 2026. I do have to note that the 10-year capital forecast is provides staff and council with an outlook of the 10-year forecast. And do have to note that that is, with council's wishes, with staff wishes, we can move structures up if need be or down in the forecast as well.
Okay, thanks, Kevin, for that. Discussion from council. I don't know where Ryan went, but we've lost Ryan. No other discussion, we can call the vote if there's no questions. All those in favor? No, that is carried. Easy one for Kevin. All right, corporate services, 8.3.1, COR 2025-13. Procurement policy updates. Recommendation reads the staff report COR 2025-13 received for information, and the staff be directed to present an update township of Georgia Bluffs procurement policy and approving bylaw for council's consideration in an upcoming council meeting. I need a mover and a seconder. Councilor Thompson. Mayor Coburn. Councilor Coburn. Sam, turn it over to you.
Thank you, everyone. We are presenting today a draft update to your procurement policy. The last procurement policy was updated and passed by bylaw in 2019. So as a good practice, it is good to regularly review your policies and update as needed. As I'm going through this, please feel free to interrupt me if you have a specific question on what I am discussing, but we obviously can have other questions at the end. So what is a purchasing policy? This is your guideline for how acquisitions of goods and services are done at the township. It is meant to maintain the integrity of all purchasing processes to obtain the best value for both short-term and long-term public funds. Throughout each year, the township will perform thousands of procurement activity. This is direct procurement. This is your more competitive procurement, sorry, tongue twister, being your RFTs and RFPs. I'm going to start with the limits here. When trying to evaluate and propose limits to you, we looked at other municipalities within Ontario that had annual operating and capital budgets of the 25 to 30 million. For 2025, Georgian Bluffs was 27 million. So we went slightly above and slightly below. When reviewing theirs, many did have direct purchases at the department head level of up to $10,000. Your quote purchases, we used to have it between 5 and 20. Request for quotes to be a bit more formal in how we are obtaining those quotes, and request for tenders. We are proposing at the department head level, 10,000 to 25,000. Request for tenders that are slightly higher in the estimated dollar amount, 25,000 to 100,000, and any competitive procurement over $100,000 would come to council. We also have the caveat of irregular results, that would always come back to council. All of these limits would be contingent on your budget approval. So as your budget, staff are preparing the budget request to provide you with a more in-depth understanding of the scope of what the procurement activities may be, so that you at budget time can have an informed decision if this is something we want to engage in. When we're looking at what is a direct purchase, so it would be a dollar value equal or less to $10,000. It wouldn't be covered by blanket order, and it's not available from our existing inventory. So we do keep water meters on hand for regular transitioning. We do keep some bag tags on hand, composts, and recycling bins. So it's stuff that we wouldn't have regularly. Staff are always encouraged to obtain 3 quotes wherever possible and to seek the best value. So an example of a direct purchase, pens. They're small dollar amounts throughout the year. We need them to function. It is not reasonable to have a request come in front of council to purchase a pen or a box of pens. Request for quotation, RFQs. We would look to have this done for procurement that is between 10 and 25,000. We still have to be able to define what we are looking to get. It's not just a blanket, show me what you got. We have to be able to set criteria around what we are looking for so that we know what you are giving us an amount on is achieving what we are looking for. And it needs to be something where the best value, best dollar value, can be obtained by the lowest compliant. So if there is someone who submitted a lower amount, but for example, we asked for stop signs and they gave us an amount for speed signs, that's not a compliant request for quote. So although we are seeking a minimum of 3, we can seek more. That does not mean we're getting 3 back. It is ultimately up to the individual to determine if they wish to submit a quote or not. Your next common type of procurement is your RFTs, or requests for tenders. These are typically a higher dollar amount that we still can define what we are looking for. So an example here can be your sidewalks. We are looking for the replacement of this section of sidewalk, like for like. We want it to adhere to minimum maintenance. We want it to be a set width and a set length, that they have more guidance on what we are looking for, and it is more detailed in nature in that sense. We're also able to achieve the best value by the lowest compliant. So again, you'd be looking for the compliance of each submission, that if we are requesting a 1.5 meter sidewalk and they have submitted a proposal with a 1 meter, that is not compliant. If we are looking at a truck and we say it must have a minimum horsepower, are they submitting something that has that minimum horsepower? Or you cannot exceed a horsepower of this. Are they within those set limits and guidelines? This, we would look to have the procurement facilitated by a purchasing agent, which as of right now, it is either myself or the deputy treasurer that have been acting in that role. This is to ensure that the procurement is a bit more standardized, that everything that is coming out of the township looks and feels the same. Previously, it had been left up to each individual department to do it all. So this will allow for some standardization throughout what we are putting out. Requests for proposals. These typically come into play when you can't definitively say, I need this, this, this. You're looking for a bit more of the intuitive idea, or how can I get to this end goal? What can you offer me? We still are going to be achieving best value, but it would be done in a slightly different way than just a dollar amount. Here, when you are putting out the procurement, you are wanting to establish any technical requirements. So this may be company experience. It may be, have you done this before? It may be anything that is pertinent to ensuring that who you are getting to do the work is qualified and competent to do it. That is your technical submission. So we are having that completed, and then you would also have the dollar amount, the financial proposal that is submitted. And there are multiple ways that you can achieve a best value for this. It can be lowest compliant. It may be you are looking to award points on the price per technical point, and you're still trying to obtain and ensure that you are getting the most economically advantage submission for the proposal. For RFPs, we would be looking to implement what is referred to as a two-envelope approach, which is those two segregations. So your technical proposal is what would always be submitted first and evaluated first, because you want to set that minimum standard. You may have someone that is the lowest price, but you've evaluated through your evaluation team, they can't necessarily do the job or do it to the level that we need. So we make sure that pricing is never a factor in that initial technical review of, can this work be accomplished? Can this company do it? We've set up with some of our last few procurement activities for RFPs an evaluation team, which includes 3 staff members, to try and make sure you have those diverse opinions and thoughts. And then we have what we're referring to as consensus meeting, where those 3 individuals who did their own evaluations without discussing to each other come together, talk it out, and make a consensus overall decision for each proponent that has submitted. Then once you have those individuals who meet that minimum benchmark, which would be disclosed within the procurement documents, then you open only the financial proposals of those who meet the minimum. We would never open financial proposals for those who didn't meet that minimum technical. And then staff would always be proposing the firm that had achieved the highest combined technical and financial, as that's considered your most economically advantaged proposal. Another common one that we may incur is sole and single sourcing. Sole sourcing, there is only one supplier who could do this. In our area, hydro. We only have one hydro provider. You're not going to get any other submissions for it if you were to try to. Single sourcing, there may be more than one who is available, but there are extenuating circumstances as to why we may not use that. An example of single sourcing could be we have a snowplow that gets a warranty on it. Something happens to that snowplow. Well, that warranty work, maybe because of the dollar amount, we should be looking at the procurement policies and those limits being RFTs, RFPs. But we have this warranty agreement with them. We're going to single source it to them because of that extenuating agreement. Any single and sourcing between the 10,000 and 100,000, we would tell you about. We would, in a report to council, outline why did we do this? What was our reasoning and rationale around those? And if it is above the $100,000, it would come to you before we even procured it. Environmentally conscious procurement. This is a new section that we are introducing within it to ensure that all departments, we're encouraging them to seek additional ways within every procurement activity to achieve the goal of being environmentally cautious. This may look different depending on what the nature of the procurement is. For vehicles, it could be looking at electric vehicles opposed to diesel where available. In the Act of a Fire Master Plan, it's harder to differentiate. When the result is a plan, how can we achieve environmentally cautious when obtaining a plan? So it would look slightly different, which is why it is a bit more generalized in how it is attainable in the policy. For advertising purposes, we want to ensure that we're casting a wide net when we are seeking these to make sure we do get that most economically advantaged procurement. So all procurement greater than 25,000, it would be posted on the township website via our bidding portal. You can register free of charge to be notified of them. You may not be able to download and submit on the documents though. But you can get notifications. I have it set up that I get notifications every day of new bidding opportunities based on some selected criteria that I had put as interest. Every opportunity, you want to get as many people to submit as possible.
Can I ask a question? I went through the same thing, great presentation so far. We had a conversation about this specific thing last year, and I think it was winter sand or whatever it is, but we talked about previous bidders being notified or calling the locals saying, hey, it's on the website. There's an opportunity on the website. You just want to make sure you're aware of it. Quick phone call. I do in my personal career, I do get phone calls on a regular basis from other municipalities that'll do that. Just so you're aware, it's on the website. They pick and choose, who they've dealt with locally, who the previous suppliers are, but it's just another way. We're inundated with electronics and emails, and a lot of people get that and it goes away and then they forget. I just know we talked about it as council last year about doing something else, but I wonder if we should be putting something in that section there.
We reduced to additional advertising is at the discretion of a department head, and that is what that would be. It would be those phone calls to local suppliers or other suppliers that may be able to. When I look at some recent procurement that we have put out, we did call some suppliers that we knew. One was that supplier we were currently dealing with. Another was a common supplier in this area. We called, told them, we have this available. Please.
As long as it's being done. I do remember years ago calling somebody when I wrote a report saying, writing a report, why didn't you bid? And they said, bid what? We had partnered with the county at that time and they weren't notified. So it's just to avoid those kind of things, right? Again, in this buy Canadian, buy local sort of mindset we're heading in, I think it just makes sense to do that.
Yes. We do have, it is at the discretion of the department head to do those kind of activities at this time. Risk management. Every single procurement opportunity that we have, we want to ensure that we're not opening the township up to inherent risks. So we may ask for proponents to submit some bid bonds, bid deposits, or other forms of security that make sure they have a little bit of skin in the game for the procurement, and it shows that they are actually invested in continuing with the procurement. Any securities that we do ask for, they would be reflective of the total procurement. Looking at securities, it may not be reasonable to ask for a security on something that is $10,000. But when we're looking, especially when the Construction Act comes into play for securities over $500,000, we have to get something. This also would be for the aftermath. Some of those securities, we're advising them, do we need a performance bond? Do we need a construction bond? We'd be advising them of that at the time the procurement is being initially looked at. All procurement, we're going to ask for copies of your insurance to make sure you are insured if something happens. We may also be asking for a copy of insurance that names us as well. And those are all ways to try and mitigate the township's liability as a whole. Reporting to council. Any and all procurement over $100,000 would be coming back to you for approval. Anything that is considered to be regular, and irregular can mean very many things. It could be something just isn't sitting right with staff about this. It needs to be a council decision. It could be no one may be qualified because they got excluded for not submitting a bid bond when they were required to, not meeting all of the technical. We may still present that to you if even no individual or no proponent met the technical. We can maybe still tell you, this is what we have. Do you wish to still award?
What? I think this is the time to ask, but currently what is the limit before council? Is it 50,000 or is it currently 100,000?
It is the above 20,000.
About 20,000 comes to council. And you're proposing 100,000 as an increase. And then you're proposing anything over 50,000 to be a tender, correct?
Tender could technically be anything over 10,000, depending on the nature.
So most tenders that I've ever been involved in say pending council approval and budget approval. And it gives, and it's done that way not to disrespect staff, but it's done that way to give staff an out and protection. I mean, because you're not necessarily approved the lowest tender. I got to be honest with you, I've been stirring this around since I read it last week, and I keep coming back to it and coming back to it. 100,000 in my mind is too much. As a council member, putting in the council shoes, we get asked a lot of things about, oh, you bought a new truck, or you bought this, or you bought that. And we kind of go, huh, guess we did. It doesn't, I don't feel like we're managing the financials are being brought up to speed. Quarterly updates, to me, that doesn't cut it. Yes, it's in the budget, but I think we're losing that ability as council over 50,000 to really understand what's going on. And I don't want to use the example of a tractor, but if we said, hey, we need this tractor, and council says, no, I don't really think we do that. We approve this, that tractor can show up. And that's the one where I went, and just not, you know, if it goes to tender, I think it should go back to council for approval. I think that should be in every tender, that it's subject to council approval. That's a standard thing. And I really, my personal feeling is 100,000 is too much. I would think 50,000 would be the limit. I think that's realistic in today's world, but I just had to get that out there.
Comments?
In relation, every tender, every procurement we put out does have the caveat, this may not be awarded at all if certain criteria is not met within it. So we do have that, but I do understand what you are saying. So there are instances where a government grant does require it to be approved by council, regardless of a procurement amount, that those would still come to council in order to ensure that we would have the required motion, resolution, support of council when doing it. Any single and sole sourcing awards that would be exceeding 25,000, you would be notified of. Council has specifically directed, and this direction may come at budget time, it may come after you notice a tender had been posted, but a motion or notice is given that you wish to be the body approving the work. And if we are not proposing for any reason as staff, the lowest compliant or that most economically advantaged, a report would be coming to council explaining why that you would be left with the ultimate decision. And if there is ever to be procurement financed by debt, that does need to be a direction of council, and that is within our annual borrowing bylaw. We've also amended some of our procurement policy to include disposal of surplus goods. Currently, we do have a policy, I believe it was from 2010, that has not been looked at. This would not include any land. This would be specific tangible assets in a sense. Many policies have this included for those trade-in activities. Or something becomes obsolete, it may be no value anymore. That bringing a report to council that has no value because it is broken down, it's going to take 15,000 to fix, to even try and resell. Let us just scrap it as needed. An example of this, we had the scrap metal proposal that we put out. We did not get many submissions. We did not get large amount submissions. It would have been something that potentially staff could have dealt with. When we come to conflicts of interest, all staff and council members involved in any procurement activities, whether that is necessarily on the council side or on your personal side, given your nature of general employment, general activities or friendships you may have as a conflict, we do need those disclosed to ensure that there is no conflict of interest and that there is no perceived conflict from an outside standpoint. I know this came up before where the topic had been, can we provide a preference for being local? Unfortunately, that does go against the Discriminatory Business Practice Act. And it is also in violation of Article 503 of the Canada Free Trade Agreement that we cannot provide any preference to local competitors. We can, as mentioned before, call them to let them know and advise we have this, but we can't have that unfortunately be a technical standard or a technical criteria to evaluate on. It's a longer policy. So I was trying to highlight here, but I am happy to take any questions if there are further.
So if you're saying local preference to any bidder when awarding a bid for a purchase, so are you giving preference to somebody that's more money? Like I guess the way I'm thinking is I would rather support somebody locally and probably cost us a couple thousand, whatever the number may be, more money than the actual best bid or the bidder that we go with, because I want to support local. Is that in context?
Some content.
Oh yeah, I get it, yeah.
When looking at recognizing tariffs are a large issue right now. The motion that was passed by council last week to ask the province to reevaluate their policies. There may be potential within that. I cannot guarantee, and I would never guarantee what that may look like. But
Councilor Colburn.
Thank you, and thanks for the presentation, Sam. This is really helpful information, and I appreciate this. A few comments. I think we do need to be very careful about showing preference, including to local folks. And this is where Councillor Winters mentioned about phoning the local ones and letting them know. I'm not even sure I'm altogether 100% comfortable with that. I get the purpose of it. I support the philosophy. But if you're not phoning everybody, then there could be a perception that you are showing some preference, and I wouldn't want to see staff put at risk for that kind of thing. So my second statement is about the report. I found it hard to know what's new, what's old, what's current, and what's being proposed. And although an immense amount of work has gone into this and it's appreciated, I always like to see the old policy and the changes made in annotation or read over that, so that we can see what exactly was in place before and what are we moving to. And lastly, I share Councillor Winter's concern over the threshold for single and sole sourcing and spending without council approval being at $100,000. I think I agree that that's excessive. Thank you.
Yep. Further comments? Haven't brought that up again from Councillor Colburn there. Is there an appetite to amend the motion that's put forth there and do that? Or do you want to bring it back as a notice of motion, or we just make an amendment now?
Just asked our clerk to bring up that slide that has the proposed purchasing limits, the current and proposed together in that chart, if that helps.
Right.
So we're really only just saying to bring it back so they can make that change before it gets brought back.
We don't even get into it then.
Councillor Colburn has her hand.
Oh, Councillor Colburn?
Yeah, thanks. You know what? I think I'm getting really tired. This has been a long meeting and I have forgotten the question I was going to ask, and now I feel really silly. So apologies, and over to you, Councillor Day, while I try to remember.
Good. Councillor Day?
I wasn't planning on saying anything at this point.
All right. Okay, so we're Councillor Thompson? Councillor Thompson?
Thanks. Thank you. I share your comments, Councillor Colburn. I unfortunately have to leave at 8. I totally misread the volume of our agenda tonight. I didn't think we would be able to spend 3 hours on this, but I am prepared to. I appreciate the presentation. I appreciate the work on it. I'm prepared to move an amendment that we change the spending limit from $100,000 trigger to $50,000, if that helps us move it forward.
Thanks, Councillor Thompson. So we got a mover for an amendment. We got a seconder for that.
Well, and just, if I can, just the question there, based on the slide that's in front of us, that's one part of it is the 50,000. But does it then get amended to come back to council for approval? Because currently it says the CAO and treasurer jointly. So by amending it to 50, does it automatically come back to council for approval? I just want to clarify that.
Would still need something for your 25,000 to 50,000, unless you are willing or wanting to amend the request for quote / request for tender to be 10 to 50,000.
And I think that's a reasonable. I can live with that, but yeah, we just need to. There's a few things here that all need to be cleared up at the same time moving forward, right? So it's
Yep. Thank you.
So through you, Deputy Mayor Pringle, to Councillor Winters, and I believe to Councillor Thompson as well. If in the report, basically the CAO and Treasurer jointly was changed from 25 to 50 under an RFP process, that would adjust the council greater than 50 from greater than 100 to a greater than 50.
That cleans it up in my mind.
Okay. So Councillor Thompson had moved it. I need a seconder. Councillor Winters, discussion? I can't see Kathy or Ryan. I'm glad there's no discussion from you guys. No. Okay, I'm going to call the vote then. All in favor of the amended motion. Sorry, amended motion.
You just can't see me.
Yeah, can't see. Oh. Perfect.
All you need is 2 hands.
Back to the main motion then as amended. I'm going to call the vote then. All in favor? That's carried. Okay, perfect. Thanks, Samantha. All right, you're back again, Samantha.
Yes, I'm going to sit down for this one.
8.3.2 COR 2025-14 water meter sole sourcing. Recommendation reads that staff be directed to negotiate a single source meter replacement project with Neptune Technology Incorporated, and that the following negotiation staff be directed to enter into an agreement for the meter replacement project with an upset financial limit of $704,000. And that staff be directed to include an update to council upon the execution of the agreement and prior to the start of any of the works in the township, which provides a final financial cost and estimated project timeline. Mover and seconder. Mayor Carlton, Councillor Day, Samantha.
Yes, through you. So in our 2025 annual budget, there was a budget request around water meter replacements for our Oxenden, Shell Lake, and East Linton system. At this time, Potawatomi is not being included, pending negotiations and where boundaries and responsibilities may lie, depending on the water supply discussions. What the meter replacement would allow for is more real-time analysis and monitoring of what is going through our systems. Right now, we perform water meter reads every other month, and we have many instances where someone will get their bill and realize my water consumption has tripled. What has happened? So we have to send staff out to physically go do a data read on it, which gives us data for, I believe it's the last 60 days. And that tells us where things may have occurred. The moving of the meters, this will allow us to be a bit more proactive in how we are doing, that alerts can be set to know, hey, this has a higher consumption. We can proactively send out a letter to that homeowner advising you may want to check these few things as we have identified your water consumption is increased. Water consumption may have increased for natural reasons, such as someone who has a pool, and in the spring or summer months, they're trying to fill their pool. So it may be people are receiving letters or notifications in that sense. We have started naturally transitioning some meters to these through our regular replacements or the onboarding of new meters. So this project would be getting all meters consistent. It would also eliminate some of the staff time, as right now a staff member every other month must go out and physically drive around the township to get the readings before we can invoice for the billings. We also would have better data to know what are we losing for water consumption on each and every line, to know is there possibly a major leak that is going unnoticed because of how it is filtrating. We have been briefly speaking to Neptune, who oversees all of our meters. We did go through a public procurement in 2013 to award our water systems, but not water systems, our water administration in a sense, to them. So we are looking to maintain that and not go through a competitive procurement, as it would be limited who can provide our water meters. When we are getting them directly from Neptune, we receive some lower pricing. If we were to try and do this through a third party, they would have to increase because they have to get the meters from Neptune. Neptune would also do the administration of the conversion. We would have staff available and willing to speak to any residents who may receive the correspondence from Neptune related to this conversion of the meter. And the Neptune is also performing work in a neighboring municipality that we are able to achieve some cost saving measures by them not having to start and stop as much within the area.
All right, thanks, Samantha, for the report. Open up to council for questions.
I don't want to go first. I do want to go, but I don't want to go first this time.
I got nothing to say.
Maybe.
Anybody else got nothing to say?
Nope.
No?
All right, so I got to go first. So, I mean, there are two water meter companies in the world. There's Neptune and there's Sensus. Prior to 2013, the municipalities were with Sensus. You put out an RFP, this is the meters, this is what we want, this is what we expect. Installation price, where you go. I've spent a lot of time over this, and there's a lot of money just to single source. And I get that we currently have some Neptune meters, we have some Neptune billing programs. However, if you put it out for tender, all of that comes as a package. I spent the last 4 or 5 days Googling every one of our local municipalities, and nobody has single sourced water meters. Everybody, Blue Mountains, Owen Sound, South Bruce Peninsula, everybody you go to, it's been a tender process. $700,000 is a lot of money to put on a water system user, which is about $700 per user, based on what's there. And the other part is there is new technology out there, but this isn't outdated technology. We as a municipality are still farther ahead than some of our neighbors with the technology that we have, being able to do data reads, backflow prevention, and the whole bit. I just can't support $700,000 as a sole source. I really can't. It's a tough swallow. And then the part that really kind of drove it home was, we're talking about replacing water meters that are still, the useful life is still 8 years away. I think we can do this properly. We can do it. Neptune may still be the successful bidder, but I think it needs to go to a competitive procurement process, and we have time to do it. And we may even have time to find grant money for it as well. We went after our manager of engineering services a while ago because he decided to do sole sourcing and engineering. We said, we don't support that dollar value. It's got to be competitive. And to me, this is exactly the same situation that we had, and I can't do it.
Any comments? Okay. I don't really have anything more to follow. That's Councilor Winters just gave me information that I didn't know from before on that too, so that's great information to have on trying to make a decision on this also. So do we got an amendment or recommendations you want to make towards this? That's recommendation that we have on the floor now.
I mean, the recommendation would be that we'd have to say no, and that we'd go to a competitive procurement process. Is all you can change it to.
So then we'd vote on this then and then go again.
So do you, Deputy Mayor Pringle? I think, yeah, this isn't, I don't think there's any direction that's needed, because we already have the direction from you to do this work as part of budget. You approved this through budget. And so I think if the recommendation fails, the only avenue left to meet your direction is to go through a competitive process. So I don't think you need to give a secondary direction. If this fails, we're going to take that.
Okay. All right, any further discussion on the recommendation in front of us? I am not seeing any. I'm going to call the vote then. All those in favor? I see none. All those opposed? And opposed carries.
Is it enough? I didn't actually vote.
Oh.
And Councilor Colbert is not visible either.
She has stepped away.
She stepped away.
And a non-vote is taken as a no.
Yeah.
Okay, we're still good then? Okay. All right, updates from members appointed to county council committees and local boards. Any updates from county council or committees and boards? Member would like to share. Mayor Carleton.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. I will try to keep this very brief. At the last county council meeting on February 27th, there was a report about potential acquisition of land from the municipality of Great Highlands for construction of a new paramedic base to serve the area of Feversham. And the draft concept site plan to be used there will be the same plan for all future paramedic station builds, which includes the proposed future base at Cobble, which is proposed to be built in 2028. And some advantages of using that same plan throughout include the ability for staff to work out of any base and be familiar with where everything is. Also included in the plan is a wellness room for staff, which will give staff a dedicated space for debriefing after calls and provide a quiet space for between calls, and will include some exercise equipment for staff to use. Next item is the Eastern Ontario Wardens Caucus issued a media release on February 11th, supporting the importance of buying local and supporting local industry. Grey County Economic Development Department is working on a response to the Eastern Ontario Wardens Caucus with focus on legislative barriers, interprovincial trade barriers, or agreements and the limits or thresholds that apply. And the last item, Councillor McQueen from Grey Highlands had asked about the Grey Transit route that will be expiring at the end of this month when the grant funding runs out. And CAO Wingrove stated that an application has been submitted to the Ontario Transit Investment Fund, and the county is waiting for an answer. And Grey, Bruce, and Dufferin counties are working together on this application. So more to come maybe tomorrow.
Thanks, Mark Eldon. Any other comments from Councillor Beck?
I can give an update from the Grace Harbor Conservation Foundation unless Councillor Winters
You go for it, I may add to it.
would like to take the lead. The Grace Harbor Conservation Foundation, or volunteer organization or board that's been fundraising since the 1990s, may dissolve due to lack of replacement volunteers for the volunteers who are aging out. I think it's notable for the financial and community impacts they've had since the 1990s. That could result in the loss of a scholarship to students, and could impact the education portion of Grace Harbor in the long run. Also on December 12th, 2024, the province set for the third year running a fee freeze for the planning departments of conservation authorities across Ontario. This will cost about $32,000 in loss this year for the planning department at Grace Harbor, and it will grow if the freeze continues into future years. And that will begin to affect our levy. Council voices are considered beneficial here. The Conservation Ontario advocacy strategy is to come, so stay tuned for that. Another provincial update as well, on January 1st, 2025, OREG 2474/24 came into effect, and that gives stronger provincial powers. So the province can take over permitting, the permitting process instead of the Conservation Authority, and can review applications and requests of an applicant. And the projects considered for this are very diverse, from socioeconomic activities to infrastructure to employment opportunities to anything else of a provincial matter. So I think you could probably fit many things into that box. Liability is complex should something be misjudged with hazards, and decisions are still based on natural hazards, but there's a lack of clarity regarding which policy will be used. So the outcomes of that are still to really be figured out as well. Councillor Winters?
And all I can add to that is I believe the tenders have been submitted for the building addition. There is an ad hoc committee meeting next Thursday to review the submissions before it comes back to the board for review on the end of the month. So that is moving forward very quickly.
Perfect, great updates. All right, anything else? Let's see, nothing else. All right, unfinished business is none, new business is none. Notice of motion, notice of discussion. Does any member have a notice of motion or notice of discussion or inclusion on the next council meeting agenda? I am not seeing any. All right, closed session. Recommendation reads that the council of the Township of Georgia Bluffs moves into closed session at 8:11 p.m. in the Sarawak room with the Chief Administrative Officer, Deputy CEO, Director of Corporate Services, and the Manager of Legislative Services / Clerk remaining in the room to discuss 13.1 advice that is subject to solicitor-client privilege, including communications necessary for the purpose open meeting exemption F of section 239-2 of the Municipal Act 2001 short-term rental accommodations enforcement option. I need a mover and a seconder. Councillor Day, Councillor Winters, discussion. Oh, Councillor Coburn.
Chair Pringle, this might be a bit of an unusual request, but given the time being that we're running into 3.5 hours shortly, and given the fact that we don't have 2 council members here with us, and given the fact that this discussion in closed isn't imminent, and we did just receive some documentation late in the day for our review, I wonder if council might consider deferring this to the next session, or is anyone else, maybe I'm the only one feeling exhausted and a little, my brain's hurting at the moment. Is there any appetite to defer this, or should we just, do you want to just carry on? I would just move that we defer it, but.
Well, I guess if we get a seconder to the motions you put forward, then we'll take that.
Not seconding, asking a question.
Okay, yeah.
I don't know what our next agenda is like.
Next
Oh,
week.
sorry, what the agenda's like. And if we just generate another really long meeting next week.
Next week didn't look as bad as tonight. So if we need a seconder to the motion put forward by Councillor Coburn to put this off till next week's meeting and have a seconder.
Sure.
Okay, Councillor Winters, discussion. I'll call a vote on the amended motion to put this meeting on, or put the closed session on to next week's meeting. All those in favor? And that carries, and back to the main motion, amended motion. Don't have to, I'm done. Okay,
Deferred.
we're done then. Okay, I'll be quiet. All right,
Thank you.
all right, well, this is my last bit of information. Council will meet as a regular scheduled meeting March 19th, 2025 at 5 p.m. If there is no further business, I will now call for adjournment of this meeting. Need a mover and a seconder. Councillor Coburn, Councillor Winters, call the vote. All in favor, sorry. All in favor, okay. That is carried. Thank you. We're now adjourned.
Agenda, but it will just transfer over to the March 19th